Chapter 1408. On the second day of the program's recording, the children and adults were brought to a large open space by the village chief. First, they were tricked into bragging. Then they were told that their wives had arrived. It was like a bolt out of the blue. They could not swallow the words they had just said. What should they do? That's right. Regardless of whether the four fathers would kneel on the keyboard when they returned home, this time, the program team had taken the initiative to invite the mothers group over to participate in the program's recording. Of course, this was not the first time. The previous 2 seasons also had the same experience. However, no one expected that they would come so early. Furthermore, the audience did not expect that not only did the mothers group come, they even came twice. They even participated in the recording for the last leg. However, this was a story for later. The arrival of the mothers group was especially magical. The village chief actually asked the 4 fathers to identify their wives by touching their hands. This seemingly absurd little segment had produced a lot of unexpected emotions. For example, Lu Yi. The first person he touched was Anna's hand. The moment he touched it, he was very sure that it was his wife's hand. The camera panned to the 2 of them tightly holding hands. There was also Lu Ye's affirmation and the blissful smile on Anna's face. The phrase, holding hands and growing old together, was probably the most appropriate one to use on this foreign couple, right? Among the audience, quite a number of them had learned about Lu Yi and Anna's love story through social media. Of course, at that time, most of them were concerned about the gossip between Lu Yi and Sienna, so they did some extended reading. However, what really touched them was this moment of holding hands. You can't see me, I can't see you, but with 2 hands holding hands, their hearts were connected. If not for the love that had never changed for the past 10 years, they would not have such a strong heartbeat when they touched each other. The sweet atmosphere between Lu Yi and Anna had an impact on many of the viewers in front of their televisions. Of course, it also had an impact on Fong Beibei and Kiki, who were at the scene. When a village chief announced the arrival of the other children's mothers, Fong Beibei had a moment of suffocation. She thought that poplar fruit had also come. She thought that it would be a surprise. Kiki also had the same thought. She came back to her senses and pulled her mother along to look for traces of her father. But he couldn't find it. Behind the curtain, there were 4 smiling Andys. It was her little friend. No. However, Kiki was not happy to see no. Instead, she was disappointed that she could not see her father. Fong Beibei was the same. She really wanted to see the sudden appearance of the poplar fruit. Yesterday's hard work made her miss the poplar fruit even more. It was not a deep longing that could be resolved with a phone call. However, in the end, the village chief still told them, poplar fruit didn't come. Really, Kiki, I'm very sorry too. Indeed, poplar fruit did not come with the 4 mothers. He was still high up in the sky. Yangwu didn't come, which made Fong Beibei and Chi-Chi extremely disappointed. Chi-Chi pursed her little mouth and almost cried. How could she not feel uncomfortable when she saw other families have their mothers come and reunite with their families, but she could only rely on each other, with her mother. But the program still had to be recorded. Fong Beibei was afraid that Kiki would continue to be depressed, so she hid her disappointment in the bottom of her heart. She put on a smiling face and pulled Kiki to join the fathers in guessing their wives. Of course, the 2 of them had to guide the fathers. This was because other than Lu Yi, who was fast and accurate, the other fathers were blindfolded and lost for a long time, but still could not find their wives' hands. This process was still very joyous. For example, Lin Yongjian accidentally touched Lu Ye's arm or a staff member's hand. For a world champion like Zhou Shimin, he was still trembling and did not dare to touch it, afraid that he would go back and kneel on the washboard if he touched the wrong hand. Under such a joyous atmosphere, Kiki slowly got rid of her previous emotions. She also happily guided Fong Beibei. After the wife recognition segment was over, it was finally time to choose a house. Yesterday, it was a shared bed, so for the first time, the fathers chose a house for the second day of the recording. And for the house selection segment, they once again added in a lovey-dovey princess carry game. The moment they heard the game's explanation, even the audience began to feel indignant, for Fong Bei Bei. Motherfucker. So the genius goddess came to record the program just to take care of the children and then watch the four of you be lovey-dovey, right? These audience members, most of them were still single. Seeing them being lovey-dovey made their grievances explode. Look at Zhou Shimin. Every time he squatted down, he would be able to enjoy a kiss from his wife on the cheek. The damage was multiplied by 100. Then look at Lu Yi. After the competition ended, he immediately received a French kiss from Anna. The damage was multiplied by 100. The single dogs were about to cry from the abuse. Of course, Fong Bei Bei did not have it easy either. In order to compete for a house, she had to go behind the back of the assistant sister that Kiki had chosen, who was very good to the children, and compete with a group of lovey-dovey couples. In fact, Fong Bei Bei was not even older than the assistant sister. She could be said to be the youngest person present other than the children. However, Fong Bei Bei still gritted her teeth and persevered. She even cooperated with the cameraman from time to time to create scenes that made the audience laugh. Kiki, Fong Bei Bei, finally completed the competition. She was panting as she pulled Kiki's hand and squatted on the ground. She did not even want to move. She said, "Luckily, your father didn't come. Otherwise, with his poor health, he wouldn't be able to compete." Carrying Fong Bei Bei and squatting down, a healthy poplar fruit would definitely not have a problem. However, his wound was still recovering. If he were to force himself to compete in such a competition, his wound would definitely reopen. Kiki sensibly used her sleeve to wipe the sweat off Fong Bei Bei's forehead. She obediently hugged Fong Bei Bei and said, "It's okay. I'll be with Mama Ma." Fong Bei Bei smiled and said, "But Mama may not be able to win. Mama only finished 6, and then she had no strength. Maybe we'll have to live in a worse house." "I'm not afraid. Papa and I have lived in a bad house before, but I'm not afraid." Kiki giggled and said, "If Mama Ma is afraid, I can protect you." "Kiki, you're so good." Fong Bei Bei hugged the sensible Kiki and kissed her happily. Fortunately, although they were ranked last, Fong Bei Bei and Kiki were still the first to choose a house because of the modesty of the other forefathers. Then, Kiki did not even think about it and straightforwardly chose the first house. Even Fong Bei Bei did not expect that the first house was the best among the 5 houses. It was equivalent to the big house of an ancient official. "The house is very good. Really, it's better than I imagined. I thought that I would have to live in a thatched house with no walls with Kiki today." After sending off Kiki, who went to buy groceries, Fong Bei Bei came to her house and sighed with the camera. "However, it's a pity that there are too few people here. It's a little uneasy." In other words, there was one person missing. If Poplar Fruit was also here, it would be a family of 3. How nice would that be? Chapter 1409. After visiting her own room, Fong Bei Bei did not stay behind to rest. Instead, she walked straight out the door. She turned around and asked the cameraman, "Where's room 5 in brother Hu Jun's house?" Very quickly, Fong Bei Bei found room 5 in Hu Jun's house. Hu Jun and his wife, Lu Fong, were sitting in their small and shabby room chatting. The two of them were very calm and were not worried about their son's grocery shopping journey. They chatted casually. "Big sis Lu, brother Hu." Fong Bei Bei peeked her head in and smiled as she pulled Lu Fong's hand and said, "Big sis Lu, why don't you come to our house for lunch?" "How can I accept that?" Lu Fong had not gotten used to the show's family's enthusiasm. She looked at the camera embarrassedly and smiled. "It's like this." Fong Bei Bei giggled and said, "Just now, when we were choosing a house, thanks to your modesty, Kiki and I were able to choose the best house. After that, I took a look. In the end, you chose the worst house that Kiki and I were supposed to live in. In comparison, the school that Lu Ye's family lived in, which was the place where they trained and rested yesterday, Zhou Shimin's family lived in room 4 by the fish pond, and Lin Yongjin's family lived in a small building. Even if it could not be compared to Fong Bei Bei and Kiki's house, it was still many times better than Hu Jun's family's simple house. I've seen it all. Your family's kitchen is very difficult to cook." Fong Bei Bei felt bad, so after looking at the house, she ran over to check on the condition of Hu Jun's house. The kitchen's heated brick bed was not far from the bed. The environment was indeed terrible. So, why don't you come to our house for lunch? Don't cook here. Our house is very big. It'll be more lively with more people. Is that okay? Lu Fong was a little hesitant. She actually wanted to go. After all, this room was indeed terrible. If they really cooked, the room would be filled with the smell of oil and smoke. Then, they would not be able to stay there. Hu Jun didn't want to go, because with his male chauvinist character, he couldn't do something like troubling others. It's okay. Fong Bebe laughed. Sister Lu, we can cook together. Kiki and Kong Kong probably bought different ingredients. It's rare for you to come here, so let's cook a few more delicious dishes for the children. All right then. With such a warm invitation, Hu Jun and Lu Fong agreed. Hu Jun said, then wait for a while. When Kong comes back, we'll take him with us. This was to prevent Kong from coming back and not being able to find him. At this moment, the children were still in the market buying the vegetables and meat that their parents had requested. Kong Kong led Xian Xian in one group, Kiki and Nuo Yi in another, and Dejun in his own group. Being in the same group as Kiki was the happiest thing. This was not only because of the pink friendship between Nuo Yi and Kiki, but also because Kiki was there. No matter what the adults asked for, the little girl could recite the long menu like the back of her hand. Therefore, Kiki and Nuo Yi's grocery shopping process was very smooth. In a short while, they had bought all the ingredients on Kiki's side and a large portion of Nuo Yi's. The rest was the portion on Nuo Yi's menu that did not overlap with Kiki's. Are we going back now? As the big brother, Nuo Yi could only follow behind his little sister Kiki. However, this scene was not out of place, because from the camera lens, it could be seen that Kiki was obviously taller than Nuo Yi. In these few months, the little girl had been working hard to grow. No, you still have beef and salad to buy, but I don't want to buy those. So I'll go with you to buy them. Then we'll go back. The logic seemed a little complicated, but following Kiki was the right thing to do. The little girl's basket was piled full of vegetables. It was not difficult for her to carry it, but it was a little awkward for her feet. She might as well use her slender arms to lift the basket onto her shoulders. However, the moment he tilted his body to the side, the ostrich egg that the village chief had requested to be tied to his waist with a net slipped out mischievously and fell to the ground, shattering into a pile of yellow egg liquid. In an instant, the atmosphere became tense. The little girl subconsciously glanced at the ostrich egg that had fallen by her feet. She did not know what to do and lowered her hands. In her panic, she did not have the strength to carry the heavy basket. Nuo Yi was also stunned. He stared blankly at the ostrich egg, not knowing what to say. Kiki's mind was in a mess. One moment, she thought that she had failed the mission. The next moment, she thought that a small ostrich that could have hatched had fallen to her death. The next moment, she thought that if she had been more careful, the ostrich egg would not have broken. After a while, her father's disappointed expression appeared in her mind, as if saying, Kiki, why can't you protect an ostrich egg? How are you going to protect your father in the future? Her thoughts were a mess of tangled twine, stuffed into Kiki's little brain. No matter how hard she tried, she could not unravel them. The little girl squatted down with trembling hands, not daring touch it. Her pitiful little eyes looked at the ostrich egg that had broken into pieces, but could no longer be restored. It's dead. Nuo Yi's unintentional words brought Kiki back to her senses. She finally understood that she had gotten into big trouble. Sob, 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 sob. The little girl stood up, her hands frantically wiping her face, but even more teardrops formed a string and kept rolling down. Her pretty and fair face immediately became red and swollen from crying. That pitiful appearance made people unable to help but feel pity for her. Nuo Yi seemed to have finally understood something. He did not say any more words, but sensibly came over. As he patted Kiki's back, he comforted her. Don't cry. It's fine. This was not enough. Kiki continued crying. Perhaps he had learned Lu Ye's big move. Nuo embraced Kiki and pulled Kiki into his embrace. At this moment, many girls watching TV had Mary Sue plots. They looked at their male, idle Nuo-e with starry eyes, wishing that they could be the girl in his embrace. There were also many boys who were watching this scene with their girlfriends. They were being ravaged by their girlfriends. Look at them. Look at them. But in reality, this was not enough. Kiki was feeling terrible because she had caused the death of a future ostrich. She was crying because of her father's disappointed eyes. This was not something that could be comforted by a little boy's embrace. It was not that it was useless, but Kiki paused for a moment. As she thought and thought, she began crying again. Those two streams of hot tears almost drowned the entire market. Kiki. Far away, outside the crowd, Fong Beibei's voice came from Fong Beibei. It was like a ray of dawn. Chapter 1410. Fong Beibei couldn't stay idle. After leaving Kong Kong's house, she didn't go back to her own house. Anyway, it was meaningless to just sit there and be bored. So, she brought the photographer and excitedly went to find Kiki, who was going to buy groceries. The market wasn't too far away. It was only a few steps away. Before long, Fong Beibei arrived. From afar, Fong Beibei could distinguish Kiki's sad cries from the noise of the crowd. Kiki! Kiki! Fong Beibei was anxious. She parted the crowd and rushed over. Kiki also heard Fong Beibei's call. She turned around and saw the anxious Fong Beibei. The little girl broke free from Nuo Yi's arm and plunged her head into Fong Beibei's embrace. Mama, sob sob. Kiki found someone to rely on. She became more and more sad, and tears quickly flowed out. What's wrong? What's wrong? Fong Beibei squatted down and let Kiki lean on her shoulder. Her soft left hand gently stroked Kiki's little head. She saw that Kiki was only crying and didn't seem to be hurt. Her anxious heart relaxed a little. Her egg fell. Nuo, he scratched his head and pointed at the egg beside him. He helped to explain. It's okay. Kiki, don't cry. Fong Beibei sighed in relief. She smiled and gently patted Kiki's back. Kiki pursed her little mouth and sobbed. But my little ostrich is dead. It hasn't grown into a little ostrich yet. It's just an ostrich egg. Fong Beibei said gently. But it will become a little ostrich in the future. Kiki sobbed and said in a choked voice, I killed it. No, this is an ostrich egg. It's not for hatching young ostriches. Just like eggs, some eggs are for hatching chicks, but some are for cooking. Fong Beibei comforted her. Don't blame yourself too much. I'm afraid that Papa will scold me. Boo-hoo. After thinking through the ostrich matter, the kind-hearted Kiki paused and said sadly, Daddy won't scold you. Your father likes you so much. Fong Beibei comforted her. But I didn't complete the task. Papa will be very disappointed. It was only then that Chi-Chi's logic gradually became clear. Her cries gradually stopped, and only soft sobs remained. Aya, what should we do? At the side, Nuo, he was a little impatient. Of course, he was not annoyed by Kiki, but he felt helpless and his temper was rising. You're crying now because you regret it, right? Fong Beibei held Kiki's little face and softly helped her analyze. You understand that you shouldn't be negligent, right? Kiki's big eyes were filled with tears, like snowflakes falling from a black gem. It was very lovely. She and Fong Beibei looked at each other and gently nodded. If there's a next time when someone gives you a task, we have to always keep it in mind. We will never be negligent until the task is over, right? Am I right? Fong Beibei asked softly. I won't be negligent again. Kiki sniffed and said softly, I know I was wrong. Yes, our Kiki already knows her mistake, and I believe that if she encounters similar things in the future, she will definitely remember the lesson and remain careful and patient. Fong Beibei laughed. She spread out her hands and said, Kiki already knows her mistake and will change. How can your father bear to scold such a sensible and obedient baby? How can your father still feel disappointed, right? Chi-Chi nodded her head vigorously, her confidence returning once more. The little girl smiled through her tears. She reached out to hug Fong Beibei's neck and twisted it a little coquettishly. She said in a cute voice, I'm not an obedient baby. Mama Ma is Papa's obedient baby. Ahem. Fong Beibei's face turned red. She looked at the camera a little embarrassedly and reached out to pinch Kiki's little nose. She deliberately said with a straight face, "Don't spread your dirty linen in public. Don't talk nonsense." Kiki giggled and said, "I'm not talking nonsense." The two sisters looked at each other intimately and smiled. They were very close. Of course, Kiki's task was not completed yet. She still had to bring Nua to buy groceries. This time, Fong Beibei followed behind Kiki and accompanied them home after buying groceries. However, Fong Beibei did not help them carry the basket because this was the children's task and they needed to complete it independently. When they returned home, Nua was reluctant to leave. He wanted to play with Chi-Chi, so he left his parents and little sister at home and didn't care about them. The friendship between the two children was indeed deeper than other children's, especially when Poplar Fruit was recuperating in Beijing. The two families had the most interaction. Anna also frequently invited Fong Beibei to bring Kiki to their house for dinner. However, they could not stick together all the time. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei privately discussed this problem. Friends were fine, but there needed to be a certain distance. If they were always stuck together, it would be easy for problems to arise. Hence, Fong Beibei coaxed Nua to go home. She waved her finger mischievously and pointed at Nuayi's path home and said, "Do your best, young man. Your future is the sea of stars. Please walk firmly towards your future path." The audience looked at Nuayi's back through the television screen and laughed heartily. Although Kiki and Nuayi's group had some twists and turns, overall, it was very smooth. Hence, they returned home very quickly. Fong Beibei brought Kiki to wash the vegetables and was about to cook when Hujun brought his family over. "Brother Kong Kong." Kiki skipped into the courtyard to welcome them. "Where are your eggs?" Kong Kong asked as she pointed at Chi-Chi's stomach, which was only left with a net bag, and asked. Kiki's expression instantly collapsed. She pursed her lips and said, "It's broken." Kong Kong waved his hand and said, "It's okay. Look at mine. It's still fine." Everyone thought that he was comforting Kiki when he said it was okay. Who knew that President Kong Kong would not change his cold attitude and proudly patted the ostrich egg that he had protected so well. "Kong, or you can't talk like that." Lu Fong laughed unhappily and gently patted the back of Kong Kong's head. There was one more thing that she did not say. "If you talk like that, you'll be lonely for life." However, Kiki had already cast aside this thought. She curiously pulled at the bag in Lu Fong's hand and asked, "Kong Kong, Mama Ma, what did you buy?" The young lady was not afraid of strangers at all. She was very open and generous, which made Lu Fong very fond of her. "There's drumsticks, they're all delicious." Kong Kong was excited at this time as he introduced the food. "Kong Kong, you're here? Come, try Annie's cooking." Fong Beibei tied a scarf and brought out a plate of stir-fried pork. She was not as good as Poplar Fruit. The dishes she stir-fried were Cantonese. Once it was out of the pot, the aroma overflowed and immediately attracted the two little gluttonous worms. "I want to eat, I want to eat." Chapter 14:11. Taking into account the difference in age, Hujun in 1968 and Lu Fong in 1969 were twice as old as Fong Beibei in 1993. Even Fong Beibei's parents weren't much older than Hujun and Lu Fong. However, it was difficult to judge people in the entertainment industry by their age. From their looks, Hujun and Lu Fong didn't look as old as they were in their 40s. On the other hand, Fong Beibei, who was already married, had the mentality of a good wife and mother. She looked young, but her temperament and behavior were mature. This made Fong Beibei and Lu Fong, who had a huge age gap, feel much closer to each other after meeting. Of course, when Lu Fong saw how virtuous Fong Beibei was, she didn't want to be outdone. She followed Fong Beibei into the kitchen. Hujun was left sitting alone at the square table in the courtyard. Kiki and Kong Kong were smiling as they knelt on the bench. They wanted to use their hands to grab Fong Beibei's dishes to eat. "Go wash your hands first." Hujun was rough but gentle. The moment he said that, the two little guys obediently ran to wash their hands. "This egg isn't comfortable. Can I take it off?" After washing her hands, Kong Kong leaned on the table, feeling a little awkward. There was an ostrich egg between her and the table. How could it be comfortable? You can't take it off. What did the village chief say to you? Without permission, it's cheating. Hu Jun's words were a little harsh and intimidated the impatient Kong Kong. However, the effect was a little too much. Kong Kong pursed her lips unhappily and sat down on the bench a little gloomily. The enthusiasm from before had disappeared. Brother Kong Kong, let me help you. Kiki ate a piece of meat, and her mouth was full of oil. She grabbed another piece and handed it to Brother Kong Kong. Kong Kong raised her head and looked at Kiki. The cold and aloof President Kong Kong was actually not reserved. He was like a cat, throwing a tantrum while eating the meat that Kiki grabbed for him. My Mama Ma's cooking is so delicious. Kiki didn't think it was a big deal. She was so immersed in the food that she couldn't extricate herself. Fortunately, Hu Jun stopped the two little ones in time and prevented them from eating to fill their stomachs. After being busy for so long, it was finally time for lunch. Of course, eating wasn't the main point. Taking advantage of this rare leisure time, everyone sat together and chatted. Lu Fong was more curious about the relationship between poplar fruit and Fong Bei Bei. This was also something that the entire country's audience was curious about. After all, after the incident, Fong Bei Bei and poplar fruit were already together. Fong Bei Bei thought about it and said with a smile, "Our situation is special. When I first met poplar fruit, I had just graduated from high school. Because I was recommended to Higashiyama University, I came early to Higashiyama University to play. At that time, when I first saw him, he was carrying a child in his arms." Fong Bei Bei recounted. That child is actually me." Chi-Chi giggled as she pointed at her own face and laughed. "Everyone knew it was you." Yes, at that time, Kiki was only 2 months old. She was just a little one. Fong Bei Bei also laughed. Speaking of which, it was quite fate. Kiki liked me very much when she saw me. She let me hug her and even took the initiative to kiss me. Poplar Fruit said that Kiki was very clingy when she was young. Other than him, she wouldn't let anyone hug her. Fong Bei Bei smiled until her eyes turned into crescents. I was the first, and I also stole Kiki's first kiss. Poplar Fruit still holds a grudge against me. Kiki shyly covered her eyes with her small arms, but Kong Kong was fascinated by the story. Lu Fong felt as if he was listening to a beautiful love fairy tale. He asked enviously, "So you two started dating at that time?" No. Fong Bei Bei waved her hand and laughed. At that time, neither of us had the intention to date. I was just curious and took 2 photos with Kiki. When we left, we didn't ask for each other's contact information. And then, Lu Fong's interest was piqued by the twists and turns. Fong Bei Bei laughed. Then about half a year later, we met again at a stray dog shelter. My roommate and I were volunteers there. Poplar Fruit was introduced to the shelter by someone and wanted to adopt a puppy. Gold, Kiki excitedly answered. Yes, then they named the puppy Gold. Now at home, it's Kiki's good friend. Fong Bei Bei smiled sweetly. Then this puppy became your red string. Hu Jun suddenly realized. Indeed, because of Gold, I needed to visit Poplar Fruit's house. That's how we slowly got to know each other. Fong Bei Bei nodded and said without reservation, but it was half a year later when we really started dating. Fong Bei Bei didn't want to talk about who was chasing who and how many twists and turns there were. She smiled and said, "After talking so much about the two of us, Brother Hu, you should also talk about your love story with Sister Lu Fong." Hey, what's to talk about? We're both old men and old women. It wasn't Hu Jun who said this, but the little Kong Kong who was next to him. This child. Hu Jun chuckled and patted his head. Don't interrupt when adults are talking. But Kong Kong did change the topic. Hu Jun and Lu Fong's love story was much less attractive than Poplar Fruit's and Kiki's. They didn't like to talk too much to the outside world. After all, they were still in the entertainment industry. It was good for them to hide it a little. Fong Bei Bei observed Kong Kong's expression. She smiled and said to Kong Kong, "Then tell me, what kind of girl do you like?" Fong Bei Bei didn't say that among the 4 boys in the program, she liked Kong Kong the most. It wasn't because Kong Kong was old and sensible, but because Kong Kong and Poplar Fruit were both Scorpios. The two of them had similar personalities. Poplar Fruit and Kong Kong were the kind of people who had their own pride. Relatively speaking, Kong Kong showed off his ability, while Poplar Fruit was a little more reserved and tactful. After all, he was more than 20 years older than Kong Kong. Poplar Fruit usually looked calm and collected. Once he encountered something he cared about, or stood in the field he controlled, Poplar Fruit's aura could crush the world. Also, Yanghua and Kong Kong were very similar to each other in terms of loyalty and loyalty. Poplar Fruit's relationship with his friends had always been very strong. For example, Song Jiwen, Fat Dragon, He-Wenjua, and so on. For more distant ones, there were also big names like Che-Jiwen, Teacher He, Alan, Artel, and Beckham. Their friendship with Poplar Fruit didn't involve interests, but even if they were far away from interests, they could still maintain a sincere friendship. This was really rare in the impetuous modern society. Kong Kong was the same. He was also a good boy who valued friendship. His friendship with Sister Pomegranate was obvious to the whole country. Many people didn't know that the assistant sister of the program group was also good friends with him. But after all, Kong Kong was still a little boy. When he was asked by Fong Bei Bei, and when Kiki, who was eating next to him, looked over curiously, his face turned red. Chapter 14:12. The leisurely afternoon was spent in laughter. Although Fong Bei Bei and Lu Fong did seriously ask Kong Kong and Kiki about the girl or boy they liked, the children's childlike answers made these serious topics very interesting. This was because of Kong Kong's surprising words, his unwillingness to play by the rules, Kiki's usual worship of her father, "I like boys who are as powerful as Papa," and Fong Bei Bei's occasional words to bridge the generation gap. This made everyone start to understand this controversial stepmother from another angle. Not only did she have beauty and gentleness, but she also had the vigor of a young person. More importantly, she had wisdom that made people's eyes light up. In the afternoon, everyone gathered together and began to play a game. It was also the village chief's so-called family sports day. The sports day was also filled with laughter. Using their faces to break through the plastic film, the guests also went all out for the sake of victory. From another angle, their faces covered by the plastic film were completely different people. Of course, they were also a few hundred times uglier. Playing this game not only relied on strength, but also the courage to not be afraid of being ugly. Although Fong Bei Bei and Kiki did not win the game because they did not have enough strength, what surprised everyone was that the mother and daughter did not have the burden of being idols at all. Kiki did not need to be mentioned. The little princess loved to be beautiful, but did not know how to take care of her image. However, Fong Bei Bei was a girl in her early 20s. She did not care about her pure and beautiful face being squeezed into a ball by the plastic film. Seeing her pick up the wooden frame and put it over her head, not to mention the audience in front of the TV, even the few fathers present who were used to the show's torment secretly gave her a thumbs up. The second game was a traditional guessing game, but the rules were different. The father was required to use his but to write, and after the mother understood the word, she had to use her own words or body language to describe the word. In the end, the child had to say the word. This tested the tacit understanding between the families. The competition was very fun. The funniest of all, Nono E, uses erratic answers to make everyone laugh. The other families also showed their mutual understanding. Even if Poplar Fruit wasn't there, Kong Kong pulled producer Xian and asked him to write with his, but to help Fong Bei Bei and Kiki guess. Fong Bei Bei and Kiki had a surprising chemistry. It's the one that you like a lot when you're bathing. She changed into a different shape and often appeared in cartoons. Fong Bei Bei explained as she gestured. Before Fong Bei Bei could finish, Kiki cheered and waved her little hands. I know, it's Donald Duck. Hee hee. Similarly, the two questions weren't able to stump Fong Bei Bei and Kiki. The mother and daughter were too familiar with each other. Fong Bei Bei knew that she should use the words Kiki said in her daily life or the things she came in contact with to describe it. Kiki was also able to quickly connect with Fong Bei Bei's thoughts and find the final answer. Winning was a joyous thing, but it felt like something was missing. Yes, other families were families of 3 or even 4, laughing and hugging each other in celebration. However, Fong Beibei and Kiki were the only family without a pillar of support. Looking at other people's excitement, they felt like they were missing out on a complete happiness. If only Uncle and Papa could come. Fong Beibei and Kiki thought at the same time. Then, where was Poplar Fruit now? He was in the village, in the house less than 200 meters away from them. The screen in the room was flashing. It was a signal recorded by camera. Poplar Fruit wasn't sitting in front of the screen. He stood by the window and looked at the open space not far away through the thick willow branches. The laughter of his daughter and wife lingered in his ears. The guests were all in the dark. Only a few people in the program group knew that Poplar Fruit had been secretly picked up by them. Yes, Poplar Fruit was their last big trick for this episode. However, after Poplar Fruit came, he became restless. He stood in front of the window and looked down. He couldn't help but say to the staff in charge of him, "Why don't you let me go down? I'm already here. What's the point of staying up here?" The staff smiled bitterly and said, "Teacher Yang, don't be impatient. It's not time for you to appear yet." "Then when should I appear?" Poplar Fruit rubbed his eyebrows helplessly and said, "Tomorrow." He arrived very early. According to the original script, Poplar Fruit would appear in front of the children the next day. So now even a cameraman was not sent to follow him. Yes, the director said that the effect of your appearance tomorrow is the best. The staff smiled and said, in other words, Poplar Fruit had to stay in this room from the afternoon to the next day. However, Poplar Fruit was restless. His mood was actually connected to Kiki and Fong Beibei. He knew that the 2 girls he loved most needed him at this time, and he also wanted to be with them. But how can they play the game without me? Don't they still need a father to write with his? But Poplar Fruit said impatiently, "Why don't they change the script? I can suddenly appear here and play the game with them." "You really can't." The staff quickly hugged Poplar Fruit's body. He was shorter than Poplar Fruit by a head. So when he lowered his head and hugged Poplar Fruit, his whole body almost burrowed into Poplar Fruit's arm. He begged bitterly, "Teacher Yang, you have to take care of your body. If you really can do it, why won't the director let you appear? We're also thinking about your body." Actually, there was no other way. Poplar Fruit's body had not fully recovered, so it was impossible for him to be too tired. Even writing with his but might cause his half-healed wound to rupture again. Even if Mango Station could really disregard the safety of the guest and force the guest to work like a cow or horse, they would not dare to go against the National Department. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs had clearly issued a letter some time ago. They could find Poplar Fruit to record the show, but if something happened to Poplar Fruit and he could not participate in the military parade next month, the relevant leaders of Mango Station would definitely not be able to bear the consequences. Under such circumstances, how could they dare to let Poplar Fruit take the risk? Okay. Poplar Fruit also understood this point. He did not want to make things difficult for a small staff member. With a sigh, Poplar Fruit sat down on the chair. "Then I'll bear with it a little longer." Chapter 14:13. Ever since he was injured, Yang Guo had used his internal strength to nourish the wound and accelerate its recovery. This also caused Yang Guo to need more time to rest than before in order to recover his dantian, which was almost depleted every day. But even so, Poplar Fruit still woke up earlier than the average person. When the cameraman in charge of him woke up, Poplar Fruit had already quietly returned from outside. Of course, he didn't go out to train. Instead, he took advantage of the fact that Fong Beibei and Kiki were still sleeping soundly to sneak into their big house and peek at his wife and daughter through the window. Fong Beibei and Kiki were sleeping under the mosquito net. Kiki had already kicked off the small quilt, but Fong Beibei seemed to have pulled the small quilt back and covered it on Kiki's stomach. The weather was very hot, but the night was still quite cool. It was better to cover with the quilt and not catch a cold. Poplar Fruit only peeked twice before turning around to leave. He was in a good mood because he could soon bid farewell to the long wait and meet up with Fong Beibei and Kiki. "Let's go." After returning, Poplar Fruit, who had already washed up, tidied himself up and smiled at his cameraman. First, they had a simple breakfast. He was the first to arrive at the dressing room. Here, the two makeup artists who were yawning had been waiting for a long time. Morning. It's been hard on you guys to wake up so early. Poplar Fruit entered the door and smiled as he waved his hand. Teacher Young is here. The two makeup artists looked at Poplar Fruit in surprise. They were different from my daughter. They usually saw many stars in the dressing room of Mango TV, so they didn't have a strong desire to chase after stars. Even when they saw those little fresh meat that often caused screams, they weren't very excited. But Poplar Fruit was different. Poplar Fruit's handsomeness wasn't earth-shattering. At most, it was the kind of handsomeness that was worth looking at. However, there was a mellow temperament about him that contrasted with his youth. Instead, it was like a book with a fresh cover and rich content. Looking at his shoulders, you would feel very at ease. Looking at his face, you would feel very warm. Then, looking into his deep eyes, you would feel that you would slowly become intoxicated, just like drinking a glass of red wine with a strong aftereffect. Therefore, it was no wonder that these makeup artists who had seen countless people would become nervous when they saw Poplar Fruit. One of them even glanced at the mirror and scratched her hair that was sticking up because she hadn't taken care of it carefully. Ahem, don't just look at handsome guys. The assistant director, who had woken up early, instructed, hurry up and put on Poplar Fruit's makeup. Otherwise, when they wake up later, they'll crash. Didn't they keep Poplar Fruit from appearing because they wanted to give the show a surprise? The makeup artist's expressions quickly became serious. The assistant director's words were like an imperial edict. Who would dare to disobey? They quickly pressed Poplar Fruit onto the chair and used all kinds of makeup on the table. Some of them were even made on the spot and drew on Poplar Fruit's face. Is this the old age makeup? Poplar Fruit asked curiously as he watched wrinkles gradually appear on his forehead under the makeup artist's Young brush. Previously, the production team had already communicated with Poplar Fruit. He knew what he was going to do, so he wasn't surprised. However, this magical look still made Poplar Fruit a little confused. In the past, he had seen other celebrities wearing old age makeup on the internet. Some of them were directly photoshopped with computer algorithms. In front of the mirror, watching oneself grow old bit by bit was a wonderful feeling. Don't talk. After the makeup artist got into the mood, she couldn't care less about her love for Poplar Fruit. She scolded him and said, wait until the makeup is done. Talking caused the facial muscles to move, and it was easy to ruin the makeup that hadn't been fixed yet. Usually, they would dye Poplar Fruit's hair before putting on makeup. However, time was tight, and the two makeup artists didn't care too much. One of them was in charge of putting on makeup, while the other was in charge of dipping her hands in the white dye. Little by little, Poplar Fruit's black hair was dyed into a mix of green, white, and gray. He looked dozens of years older in an instant. Finally, after nearly half an hour, Poplar Fruit's old age makeup was finally done. With white hair and a face full of wrinkles, Poplar Fruit looked like an old man in his 60s or 70s. Of course, the only thing that didn't change was his eyes, which were full of wisdom and energy. The two makeup artists, who had finished their work, took advantage of the final step and pulled Poplar Fruit to look around. Poplar Fruit felt that their eyes had inexplicably become a little hot, as if they weren't checking for flaws, but looking at him. In fact, that was the case. Poplar Fruit was led by the assistant director to an empty room with only 3 old-fashioned wooden armchairs. The two makeup artists couldn't help but get excited in the dressing room. Do you see? This is Poplar Fruit. Why is he still so handsome when he's old? Yes. Do you see his eyes? They're super hot. Why do I feel that he's even more charming when he's old? I'm so jealous. If only I could find such a handsome husband for the rest of my life. Ahem. The assistant director, who had just walked out, came back and glared at them angrily. This made the two makeup artists, who were smitten with him, calm down. Poplar Fruit, who was sitting alone in the room, felt that his surroundings were quiet, and the atmosphere was slowly becoming a little heavy. He smiled and said to the photographer, they just woke up now, right? We might have to wait for a long time. Yes, it should take more than an hour. Teacher Yang, if you're thirsty, there's mineral water over there. The photographer said honestly. It's okay. I just can't wait to see them. Poplar Fruit laughed. I want to see how she looks with her old makeup. And I also want to see Kiki's reaction when she sees us aging. Outside, the adults and children who had already eaten breakfast were separated by the village chief in the name of an activity. The children were led by the assistant sister, while the adults were divided into two groups, male and female, and entered the dressing room to have their makeup done. Needless to say, the female group's dressing room was also equipped with clothes. They all changed in a Chinese-style cheongsams, and coupled with their carefully designed old makeup, it suddenly felt like Zhang Ailing was reincarnated. Life was a gorgeous robe. Just like when a woman was old, she could still wear gorgeous clothes and be beautiful. However, unlike the other four mothers who were full of anticipation for the next phase, Fang Beibei was looking forward to Kiki's reaction when she saw her aging. But more than that, she felt regret. Really, in these 3 days, Fang Beibei had never missed Poplar Fruit as much as she did now. She missed the man she loved so much. They said that they would slowly grow old together. But why weren't they together this time? Fang Beibei's heart was sour and blocked, and she felt like crying. Chapter 14:14. With a trace of regret, Fang Beibei came to a house under the guidance of the photographer. She turned her head and asked with a smile, "Is it here?" The photographer nodded and said, "Yes, just open the door and go in." Fang Beibei gently put her hand on the iron ring of the door. The moment she used her strength, her heart suddenly pounded involuntarily. Before he had time to think, Fang Beibei had already opened the door. Creak, creak, creak. The old door groaned as the light from the outside slowly entered the house. As the door slowly opened, a figure sitting on an armchair gradually came into view. Oh, Fang Beibei didn't go in, but stood at the door in disbelief. She raised her hands and covered her mouth. Her beautiful eyes excitedly looked at the figure that slowly turned around. She was so excited that tears rolled in her eyes. Poplar Fruit turned around. Although he had waited for a long time and imagined countless scenes when they met, when he really saw Fang Beibei, whose hair was mostly white and whose face was imprinted with the traces of time, he couldn't help but be moved. "What's wrong? Can't you recognize me?" Poplar Fruit's nose was a little blocked, but his voice seemed to be more magnetic and seemed to have the thickness of time. He stood up, opened his arms, and said mischievously, "Surprise." Fang Beibei couldn't control her emotions at this time. She smiled shyly while tears bloomed in the corner of her eyes. She gently stepped over the threshold and affectionately threw herself into Poplar Fruit's arms. Fortunately, the old age makeup was more stable after it was set. Even if it was removed, it still needed a special makeup remover. Otherwise, it would be exposed by Fang Beibei's tears. "Did you miss me?" Poplar Fruit hugged Fang Beibei and asked softly. "Yes." Fang Beibei's voice was also soft. Compared to before, she had found someone to rely on. She didn't have to be as strong as a tomboy. The sense of dependence in her voice was very strong. "I didn't know you were here. I thought you weren't coming." The two sentences seemed to have the same meaning, but the latter sentence was filled with joy and happiness that seemed to jump from his heart to his voice. "Huh." Poplar Fruit gently laughed. He pulled Fang Beibei up and carefully looked at her. He said, "If I don't come to such an important event, I will regret it for a long time." Fang Beibei felt Poplar Fruit's burning gaze. She shyly touched her face and asked, "Do I look ugly now?" Now, except for Fang Beibei's eyes, which were still filled with the aura of youth, her entire body seemed to have crossed the time and space tunnel and entered the age of 40 or 50. Of course not. No matter if you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, or 10,000 years old, you will always be the most beautiful in my heart. Poplar Fruit said affectionately. This was not a show. From the love in Poplar Fruit's eyes, Fang Beibei felt like she was soaking in a honey pot. "Me too. You are also the most handsome in my heart." Fang Beibei sweetly smiled. She leaned on Poplar Fruit's arms and looked up at Poplar Fruit. Although Poplar Fruit was still very different from before and seemed to have become a little old man in his 60s, Fong Beibei still looked at Poplar Fruit with infatuation, just like when they were together under the moon. That deep and lingering love could be felt by the audience through the TV. Some are moved. Many couples, or many viewers who were looking forward to a beautiful love, seemed to be immersed in the sweet and warm atmosphere created by Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei. There were also those who were sad. This loving scene caused thousands of critical hits to countless single people. Many people fiercely scrolled through Weibo and complained, "My HP bar is empty. It's like a knife directly stabbed into my heart." Compared to the emotional feelings in the other rooms, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei were indeed relatively less moving to tears. After all, they still lacked the real accumulation of time. Looking at the others, there was no need to talk about Hu Jun and Lu Fong, Lin Yongjin's family, and even Zhou Shimin and Rand Yingying. The two of them had been in love for 10 years. The days after their marriage were longer than the days that Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei had known each other. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei had not even experienced the 7-year itch. Of course, it could not be said that their relationship had never encountered a crisis. In the past, they had quarreled to the point of almost breaking up. But overall, the relationship between Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei was very strong. Even if there was a 7-year itch, it was probably just a small hurdle that they could easily cross. In comparison, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei's relationship was indeed very inexperienced. But this inexperience did not give the audience a feeling that they were not reliable. On the contrary, the academic temperament between the two of them, born from being in the ivory tower, just happened to make up for this gap. Poplar Fruit was low-key and steady, while Fong Beibei was lively and gentle. They were like a pair of jade pendants that were perfectly compatible. Just by gently putting them together, they could make an intoxicating sound. At this moment, looking at the white-haired couple who were still cuddling under the morning light, holding hands and gazing at each other, even the pickiest audience was willing to give their blessings. That's it. Live well for the rest of your life. There was only one exception. Time and space changed, and a person hugged a pillow in front of the TV, feeling dejected. Zheng Yujie had always been watching Poplar Fruit's show. Just like how she scrolled through Poplar Fruit's Weibo every day, regardless of whether Poplar Fruit was showing off his daughter or showing off his love. Since the show Where Are We Going, Dad started airing, Zheng Yujie had been watching it regardless of rain or shine. Others were watching the cute children and Kiki, but Zheng Yujie's gaze was always moving with Poplar Fruit. But only today's episode made Zheng Yujie, who had always been stubborn, cry her eyes out. This was not because she was moved, but because she was sad, heartbroken. The saddest thing in the world was not Romeo and Juliet dying together for love, but when Liang Shambua heard that his beloved Zhu Yingtai was engaged to someone else, he felt like he was struck by lightning. Of course, Zheng Yujie felt that she was even more miserable. She fell in love with a man who might not be able to say love to her in this lifetime. She knew that Poplar Fruit had feelings for her, but Poplar Fruit had already promised another woman who he loved even more deeply to hold hands with for life. Zheng Yujie was still holding on to her fantasy, but the fantasy on the screen of Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei was shattered. Zheng Yujie did not feel any hope. Yes, seeing them hugging each other and hearing their sweet words, Zheng Yujie felt that she really could not continue to be entangled with Poplar Fruit. This was a sadistic relationship that was destined to have no ending. But it seemed that she could no longer leave. Don't scold Xiaohan. Zheng Yujie's scenes are not over yet. Really. Chapter 14-15. Sitting there and chatting, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei actually discussed a little trick to deal with the upcoming Kiki. Under the guidance of the cameraman, Kiki staggered to the door. Before this, the little girl naively thought that she was playing the truth game with the village chief again. Pushing the door open, Kiki saw the back of a gray-haired figure, just like Fong Beibei, but she saw two figures. Although it was just a figure, Kiki recognized it at once. It was too familiar. Papa? Mama? The first voice was a surprise, but the second voice was indeed, because of the doubts in her heart, gradually changed into anxiety. Is it Kiki? Poplar Fruit's old voice suddenly echoed in the house. It was hard for him to imitate so well. Perhaps even the best actor could do it. Yes, Kiki answered, but she felt that the man was very different from her father. How should she say it? It seemed that her father had become old. She hesitantly went in through the door, but stood by the door, not daring to go forward. Poplar Fruit gently turned around. She didn't know why he was so good at acting at this time. The trembling movement was like the movement of an old tree that had been withered for hundreds of years. There was no sound, but she could simulate the uncomfortable feeling of caca in her ears. Come here, let Papa see, Kiki. Yangwa raised her head. Her white eyebrows, wrinkles that were knitted together like Chi-Chi's grandfather's, and her gray hair that alternated between black and white made Chi-Chi feel all kinds of discomfort. But this was indeed Papa. Kiki's inner call overcame the fear on the surface. She slowly moved in front of her father, with a blank expression on her little face. Finally, the little girl held her father's hand. It was still as warm as before, but why did Papa become like this in just a few days? Fong Bei also raised her head. She didn't say anything, because her voice couldn't be very old. If she spoke, she would be exposed. So Fong Bei looked at Kiki with a deep and old gaze, as if she was looking at her carefully, as if she hadn't seen her for a long time. Papa, Mama, what happened to you? In the end, Kiki was still naive and cute. The first reaction in her little head was not whether or not her father and them were working together to put on an act. Papa came to see you and Mama, and then accidentally walked into a room with your mama. Poplar Fruit pretended to be very strenuous and said, this room, very magical. 1 minute outside is equivalent to a year inside. Your mama and I were trapped here for more than 30 years, and then we became so old. Kiki believed that it was true. She grabbed her father's hand and couldn't help but use more strength. Papa and Mama haven't seen Kiki for decades. I miss you so much. Poplar Fruit used his other big hand to gently cover his daughter's hands and patted them gently. He blinked his eyes and made a sad expression, but he couldn't shed a tear. It seemed that his acting skills were still a little lacking compared to the movie Emperor. Kiki's little heart was touched by her father's sad words. She pitifully hugged her father's hand and asked in a trembling voice, Papa, will you die? Maybe Papa is old. Poplar Fruit seemed to have learned from Lu Yi that he wouldn't stop until he made his daughter cry. His words became the fuse that ignited Kiki's emotional outburst. Woo, I don't want Papa to die. I don't want to. Kiki's thoughts were already in a mess. Just like when Poplar Fruit saved her in the factory, her control was far weaker than her father's. She hugged her father's arm and cried with snot and tears. Seeing the little girl's sad appearance, the audience felt so distressed that they couldn't help but scold Poplar Fruit. Can't you speak properly? Poplar Fruit secretly laughed and said, Don't be so sad. Your papa is still fine. In the future, when he's old, he might get sick and die, but you don't have to cry because life, old age, sickness, and death, this is our life. Fong Bei secretly patted Poplar Fruit's arm and looked at Poplar Fruit reproachfully, as if to say, That's enough, don't cause trouble. Kiki violently shook her head. She felt so uncomfortable that her nose was blocked. She sobbed and said, I don't want Papa to die. Papa is dead. What am I going to do? Hearing this, everyone's heart ached. Kiki, who had relied on her father since she was young, couldn't imagine not having her father by her side. In fact, she had experienced the time when she was kidnapped and Poplar Fruit was seriously injured, but at least Poplar Fruit was still there, so there was still hope. Fong Bei's tear ducts were shallow, so when she heard the little girl's voice that sounded as if the sky had collapsed, she couldn't help but tear up. No, Papa isn't dead yet. Can't Papa be with you for a few more decades? Poplar Fruit quickly picked up his daughter, held her in his arms, and gently comforted her. When you grow up, fall in love, find someone who can protect you like Papa, and then get married. I don't want to. Kiki, in her father's arms, shook her little head and cried, I don't want to grow up. I don't want to fall in love. I don't want to get married. I want Papa Woo you. Fong Bei rebuked Poplar Fruit with a glare. She moved to the position in front of Poplar Fruit, moved the armchair forward, and sat very close to Kiki and Poplar Fruit. She gently pulled Kiki's little hand. Kiki, Papa, and Mama will grow old, and one day we will all become like this. Fong Bei's other hand wiped away the tears on Kiki's face, who was in Poplar Fruit's arms, and softly said, Then you will become a big girl. Don't say that you don't want to. Fong Bei said with a smile, Papa and I are very happy to see you grow up day by day. Just like how you used to be so small, but now you have grown so beautiful. Kiki's crying gradually stopped under Fong Bei's gentle voice. The little girl's eyes were red, and her long eyelashes were still hanging tears. You don't want to see Papa and Mama grow old, and Papa and Mama also don't want to grow old so quickly, but we will cherish every minute and every second that we have together, right? Fong Bei said with a smile. As long as we are together, our lives will be complete and happy. But Papa is getting old, and Mama is also getting old. I understand the reason. Kiki sniffed, and her voice was heard softly. I haven't grown up yet, and I can't take care of you. At this moment, Kiki's thinking was very different from before, but her sincere words were better than any words of love. No matter how stone-hearted the audience was, they would melt into a bowl of warm tea. Moved Poplar Fruit and Fong Bei's eyes, and also filled the entire lens and the entire TV screen. Chapter 14:16. Woo-woo, Kiki is so good. You're so sensible. I'm so touched. I'm going to cry for a while. Fong Bei saw that the atmosphere was still depressed because of Poplar Fruit's previous nonsense. She smiled and mischievously rubbed her eyes with her hands. The kind Kiki did not suspect anything. She came out from her father's arms, opened her slender arms, hugged Fong Bei, and tried to comfort her. Ma, don't cry. Don't be afraid. She was still immersed in Poplar Fruit's lies. Fong Bei smiled helplessly. She held Kiki's little face, smacked a kiss on her forehead, and said with a smile, How can you be so cute? Poplar Fruit snickered. He was very touched, but he dared not to admit it. He had to leave a mess for Fong Bei to clean up for him. Fong Bei rubbed Little Muddle's hair and said, Okay, you still haven't realized that your father is teasing you? Kiki turned her head blankly and looked at her father. Her father had not had time to restrain the smile on his face. We're participating in a segment. You see, your father and I are old. In fact, it's all makeup. Touch your mother's hair. It's fake hair. Fong Bei smiled and pulled Kiki's soft little hand, letting her grab her hair that was obviously shorter. It's real, Kiki cried out in surprise. She touched Fong Bei's face and immediately felt that it was different from the skin on her hand. Where's Papa's? Kiki turned around and asked her father to lower his head. Then, she curiously touched her own hair and even grabbed 2 handfuls. Io. Poplar Fruit laughed. This is real. It's just dyed. Papa is bad. You lied to me. The little girl finally came back to her senses. She pouted her little mouth, stomped her feet, and said a little angrily, Daddy was wrong. Daddy was wrong. Poplar Fruit also did the same as Fong Bei. He held his daughter's face, kissed it, and said, Daddy shouldn't have lied and made Kiki sad. Hee, I forgive you. The little girl was not angry. She was pretending just now, and now she laughed. She laughed happily and felt a little lucky, because her father and mother did not really grow old. The little girl put her little arms around her father's neck and let her father carry her to sit on his lap. Then she said to her father very intimately, Papa, why have you all become old? But I haven't. Fortunately, the injury on Yang's thigh was on her back. Chi-Chi was also quite heavy, and pressing on the wound was very painful. Because we want to give you a surprise. Poplar Fruit exaggeratedly opened his arms and said, Surprise. However, Fong Bei laughed and decisively exposed him. There's only surprise, no joy. Kiki, your father's bad. Someone seemed to have forgotten that she also agreed with Poplar Fruit's proposal. That's right, Papa, you can't lie to a child. The little girl joined her mother in criticizing her father. Poplar Fruit chuckled and changed the topic. Look at Daddy and Mommy, we've grown old, who's prettier? I think Mama Ma is prettier. Kiki twisted her little neck, looked left and right, and giggled. You're not deliberately saying that because Daddy lied to you, right? Poplar Fruit asked, unconvinced. No, I'm prettier. Kiki, come here, give Mommy a kiss. Fong Bebe laughed happily and hugged Kiki, who jumped down from Poplar Fruit's lap and kissed her again. The two girls looked at Poplar Fruit and smiled. Looking at the two pairs of smiling eyes, Poplar Fruit could only think of one word: beautiful eyes. Kiki felt that it was not good enough at this time. She ran up, gently pulled her father's hand, shook it, and said softly, Papa, don't be unhappy. Mama Ma is beautiful, but Papa is not beautiful. But Papa is very handsome. You're really my daughter. Poplar Fruit laughed, rubbed Kiki's little head, and kissed his daughter through his bangs. He was also very happy. Different from other families, Poplar Fruit's family was still a young family. After crying, people looked at them and smiled, which made their hearts warm and sweet. But the recording was not over yet. After simply removing the makeup on their faces, they finally looked normal. Poplar Fruit and Fong Bebe held hands and went to the hall of the big house where Fong Bebe lived to meet Kiki. Although the makeup was removed, the two still looked like an old couple, but they held hands like a young couple, which made people feel very warm. The other families also came here after saying goodbye to the emotional scene. Those who arrived early had already found chairs to sit down. When they saw Poplar Fruit, they stood up in surprise. Yo, Poplar Fruit, you're still here. Huh, are you better? There's no big problem. Poplar Fruit hugged them one by one and greeted them happily. After recording so many episodes, the five fathers had already formed a deep friendship. This scene was very precious because this was the first time the five pairs of fathers and mothers gathered together. But in the end, there was a small segment in this episode's recording, and that was the children bringing water to wash their parents' feet. From TV, this segment, which had been used so many times, could no longer move the audience as much as the original TV commercial, and some extreme viewers even felt that it was fake. But sitting in the armchair, from Poplar Fruit's perspective, it was a completely different feeling. Looking at his daughter holding her small face, swaying as she carried a basin of water, crossing thousands of mountains, thresholds, leaping over thousands of rivers, small ditches, to reach him, then squatting down, using her small fingers to rub his big feet, that kind of happiness accompanied by joy leaped onto his face. Look at him. Fong Bebe covered her mouth and laughed happily. In fact, who wasn't like this? After Kiki helped her father wash his feet, she washed her mother's feet. Fong Bebe also laughed happily, and even hugged Kiki and kissed her without caring that she was wet. Later, an interview with the fathers was added in the show. During the interview with Poplar Fruit, he put his hands together and said with a smile, "Thank you very much for the careful arrangement of the production team. My body can't support a long recording, but I didn't expect the production team to be so generous and help me change the time." And then this segment was really touching. With my wife, Bebe, and my daughter, Kiki, I spent an unforgettable time growing old. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, "Really, I'm very grateful. If I missed this segment, I think I'd be very regretful." From this segment, I think we've learned a lot. Poplar Fruit said in the end, but the most important thing is to cherish the happy time we have now, and cherish the people we love. We can't wait until they're old or gone, and then it's really too late to love them. Chapter 14-17. Poplar Fruit's popularity was unexpected. It was even more popular than Poplar Fruit's popularity in China. This had a lot to do with the way the foreign media reported it. The domestic reports mainly focused on Poplar Fruit's official status, such as the future professor, the youngest department head, double doctorates, and so on. Although these were very impressive, many young people were not interested in them. The foreign reports took a different approach. They dug up and focused on many of Poplar Fruit's heroic deeds. For example, like a lone hero, he resisted the violent terrorists at the train station with his own strength and even defeated them. For example, Yang killed the bank robber with her bare hands. That jumping skill and fighting scene was like a movie. It made people click their tongues. Another example was the kidnapping of Kiki, whose fever had subsided because of Poplar Fruit and Mango TV's low-key handling. Under the investigation of the foreign media, the details gradually came to light. First of all, it was confirmed that Kiki's kidnapping was a revenge incident. The people who kidnapped Chi-Chi were the fugitive criminals from the group of drug dealers who robbed the bank. Secondly, although they were not sure that Poplar Fruit's rescue was an international rescue operation, as the specific location of the rescue operation had been kept secret by Yin Wanxiong to only a few people. However, from the foreign media's investigation of the smoking gang, they gave a guess that was very close to the truth. This guess would not cause an international dispute, but at least it covered Poplar Fruit's rescue operation with a mysterious and exciting color. There were many other examples, such as Poplar Fruit going into the heart of the kidnappers like a lone hero, Poplar Fruit's madness, and after rescuing Kiki, Poplar Fruit was seriously injured, and the bullet was only a short distance away from his heart. These pieces of information, which were not difficult to find, were all dug up by the foreign media. It was as if they were mining. Every time they found a new piece of news, they would be as excited as if they had found gold or diamonds. Countless editors stayed up all night to connect these clues into bizarre stories. China's report downplayed the role of Poplar Fruit, while foreign media's report weakened the existence of the police in solving the case. Instead, it highlighted Poplar Fruit's fatherly love without regard for his own safety. Foreigners liked this kind of personal heroism, and they also liked this kind of tragic love. After this news became popular, hundreds of millions of netizens discussed it on social media. Isn't this a real-life hurricane rescue? Many people exclaimed. 7 years ago, Manison's hurricane rescue was a huge success. In order to rescue his abducted daughter, a retired Secret Service agent charged into the mafia's territory. Manison's care and love for his daughter, as well as his unscrupulous and fearless image of himself, was deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. In comparison, wasn't Poplar Fruit's act of rescuing his abducted daughter as revered as Manison's? Everyone knew that Poplar Fruit's skills were extraordinary. Netizens who had watched the videos of Poplar Fruit dealing with the thugs at the train station and bank robbers knew that this young father with a doctorate was an expert in Chinese kung fu. There were even people who took photos of Poplar Fruit's bare upper body from Fashion Week back then. They pointed at Poplar Fruit's strong muscles and exclaimed in admiration, "China's Rambo." However, Poplar Fruit wasn't as lucky as the main character in the movie, nor did he have Rambo's steel body. Poplar Fruit was just an ordinary person. He was also seriously injured and was almost on the verge of death when he was rescued. However, this made people feel the cruelty of reality and how difficult it was for Poplar Fruit. Fortunately, he managed to pull through. Seeing Poplar Fruit's upright posture during the military parade, everyone was glad that there were still good people in this world who could live a peaceful life. Even though he was seriously injured, Poplar Fruit was still able to recover in more than a month. Of course, there were also many netizens who, because of their admiration for Poplar Fruit, went to watch one of the few shows where Poplar Fruit appeared for a long time. Where Are We Going, Dad? This show unexpectedly became a small hit overseas. However, foreign netizens still paid attention to Poplar Fruit and his daughter. From the show, they truly understood Poplar Fruit's love for Kiki. It was like a spring breeze, sprinkling in every viewer's heart bit by bit. Foreigners also understood love. From TV series such as Modern Family, it could be seen that they preferred this kind of fatherly love, this kind of family relationship. Although some people might think that it was normal and ordinary, when this kind of fatherly love was connected to Poplar Fruit's sacrifice to rescue his daughter, it was enough to make all the viewers sigh. Among ordinary people, Poplar Fruit's influence had reached an amazing height. There were even many foreign netizens who had already regarded Poplar Fruit as their idol. Because of this, there were even some small Hollywood film companies that ran to China, wanted to invite Poplar Fruit to make a movie. When they heard the news, more domestic film companies also flocked in. Of course, Poplar Fruit's popularity played a key role, but the film company actually had a mature consideration. Poplar Fruit's image and temperament were good, and he was also a martial arts master like the two brothers Long. By using his popularity, it was inevitable that they would be able to take root in Hollywood. Moreover, didn't Poplar Fruit participate in a variety show? In everyone's view, even if Poplar Fruit had a university teaching and administrative status, he was still a figure in the entertainment industry. Many Chinese celebrities dreamed of going to Hollywood, but did not have the chance. How could Poplar Fruit refuse? However, Poplar Fruit refused. At first, he declined, but later on, Poplar Fruit really did not have the time to deal with a wave of invitations. So he simply hung up the no war sign. Not only did he face the reporters, but he also pinned his unintentional electric shock attitude on Weibo. Finally, the small film companies that wanted to fish in troubled waters were no longer rejected by Poplar Fruit, but the big film companies came running. Even if Poplar Fruit was closed, they could still find Poplar Fruit in school. "I don't make movies," Poplar Fruit said helplessly. "We're not looking for you to make movies." The person from 20th Century Fox was very happy because Poplar Fruit spoke English so well that it was as if he was talking to his own countrymen. There was no language barrier when they communicated. "Then what do you want?" Poplar Fruit asked, puzzled. "We want to buy the adaptation rights of your story." It turned out that Fox, who once released Hurricane Rescue, had taken a fancy to Poplar Fruit's real-life story and wanted to buy it, adapt it into a movie script, and then film it. "We guarantee that tens of millions of people in the world, hundreds of millions of people want to see such a movie. Fatherly love and guns. This is the eternal source material of Hollywood movies," the person said while dancing. "Sorry, excuse me." Poplar Fruit smiled and patted the person's shoulder, but he had no interest in chatting with the person. "Although to you, this is a good source material and a gimmick, to my family, this is a memory that they don't want to mention." Yangwood didn't even turn back as she left. Chapter 14:18. Amidst the hustle and bustle, Poplar Fruit calmly ushered in his first semester as the dean of the department. Originally, a young boy was riding on top of everyone's heads. Not to mention the Eurasian teachers, the other teachers in the college who had struggled for decades and were still in teaching positions or were only in the position of deputy dean, were faintly unconvinced of Poplar Fruit. However, after returning from the military parade, Poplar Fruit had supreme prestige. Even the principal was willing to give him generous treatment. The students below were even more in awe of him. At this time, no one dared to jump out and criticize the college's arrangement for being unfair. After all, Poplar Fruit was a person who had been praised by the number one leader. Who dared to question the number one leader's vision? Of course, putting aside the issue of age, to evaluate Poplar Fruit's ability as an equal, regardless of whether it was a teacher or a student, they all had to bow down to him. In the last teaching seminar before school started, Poplar Fruit faced teachers of 7 different languages at the same time. Whether it was answering questions or asking questions, his ease and knowledge shocked everyone. However, compared to Poplar Fruit's verbal battle with the group of scholars at Xinda Translation, this was only a small scene. The beginning of the new semester was a busy start for Poplar Fruit and the Eurasian teachers. This was because they had to organize an entrance exam, organize the students to fill in their applications, and finally decide on their second foreign language. Of course, second-year students could also join in. After second year, the burden of common subjects was reduced. Some outstanding students who had extra energy could study a third foreign language. This was a big innovation of Higashiyama University. Students who studied a third foreign language would have strong competitiveness in the future. Whether it was in postgraduate studies, going abroad, or seeking a high-income job in the future, it would be a very conspicuous bonus point. According to Poplar Fruit's recent understanding of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, if a student of Higashiyama University mastered 3 foreign languages, the possibility of entering the Ministry of Foreign Affairs after graduation was very high. However, learning 3 foreign languages at the same time was a big challenge. One had to know that learning 2 foreign languages could make half of the students feel uncomfortable and only a quarter of the students could persevere. Learning 3 foreign languages at the same time was not only a matter of time, but it also required the student to have a high level of linguistic talent and interest in learning foreign languages. Even in Higashiyama University, which had most of the outstanding students in the Guangdong and Hunan provinces, Poplar Fruit estimated that there would not be more than 10 students with such ability and aptitude in each batch. As for the Sanskrit and African languages taught by Poplar Fruit himself, it was estimated that there would be even fewer people choosing them. It was unlikely that there would be a single person chosen in a year. Of course, this was also a matter of foundation. Higashiyama University's traditional strengths were in medicine, economics, and other sciences, literature, history, politics, and social sciences. Language studies could not even be compared to the Guangdong Foreign Studies University in the city. Therefore, Poplar Fruit had to start from the basics with the academy. After a few years, their students would be able to enter the market and earn a reputation in the market. Naturally, more outstanding students would be willing to enroll. Of course, Higashiyama University had already created a huge signboard like Poplar Fruit. According to an organization's investigation, the number of applicants for Higashiyama University increased by 6% this year. This was equivalent to having tens of thousands of outstanding students. Many of them had changed their view of Higashiyama University because Poplar Fruit was teaching at Higashiyama University. This was just like how, after Lecture Room became popular, the number of applicants for Shaman University skyrocketed. This comparison was not accurate enough. A more similar example was like how the campus bell of a martial arts university became popular on the internet. Many new students applied for martial arts universities just to see the beauty of the cherry blossom goddess. Although this could only affect a small number of people, and the only thing that could make the school competitive in recruiting students was the improvement of their own abilities. However, from this short period of glory, it could be seen how powerful the appeal of a person with considerable influence in society was. However, what really made Chun Zongdai happy was that this year's postgraduate exams in the Foreign Studies Department had also become popular. These newly recruited postgraduate students obviously had higher scores than previous years. They were not like the undergraduates who followed the crowd blindly. The reason why they chose Higashiyama University and the Foreign Studies Department was because of Poplar Fruit's success. It was because the Foreign Studies Department had nurtured a local born and bred talent like Poplar Fruit. Entering Higashiyama University's Foreign Studies Department was, of course, also a desire to replicate Poplar Fruit's success. However, Poplar Fruit's success would not be replicated so easily. This guy's talent was not something a normal human could compare to. Chun Zongdai had no intention of deceiving the students. However, as the dean and instructor, he did not want to disappoint the students' expectations. Therefore, this year's postgraduate teachers had a heavy responsibility. Chun Zongdai began to consider whether he should increase Poplar Fruit's burden. There was absolutely no problem with Poplar Fruit's ability. It would not be a problem to let him be a doctoral supervisor at all. It could be said that Poplar Fruit could be used as a revolutionary brick to move wherever there was a need. However, Chun Zongdai could not do this for the time being. Even the title of a postgraduate supervisor could not be thrown on Poplar Fruit's head. That was because of the lack of qualifications. Next month, the title of Associate Professor of Poplar Fruit would be officially announced. Chun Zongdai was still looking forward to throwing out the atomic bomb-level thesis of Poplar Fruit after the title was announced. He wanted to help Poplar Fruit get the title of professor next year. Before this, Poplar Fruit could only obediently guide the undergraduates or occasionally help the postgraduate supervisors. He could not rush it. However, this year, the School of Foreign Languages was ambitious. Not only did they invest a lot of effort in the academic construction of the school, but they also had to boldly expand the school's traditional resources. In the first semester, Poplar Fruit prioritized stability and laid a good foundation for the Eurasian language department. However, in the new semester next year, Poplar Fruit would go abroad more often with Chun Zongdai and the school's people. On one hand, they would participate in international industry conferences and forums to increase the school's voice in related areas. On the other hand, they would also look for resources to cooperate with excellent foreign universities. For example, the school had cooperation with some foreign universities for small languages such as Spanish, French, Korean, Taiwanese, etc. Poplar Fruit would also strive to use his influence and academic ability to help the school build bridges with more excellent schools. Especially for his Eurasian language department, the students still needed to increase communication with native speakers to avoid learning a mute language. Therefore, the junior students and the foreign exchange students practiced speaking and correct pronunciation. The senior students went abroad to improve themselves in a real language environment and personally experience the local conditions and customs of the foreign countries. This way, they would be able to apply what they had learned. When they graduated, they could directly become the core talents of the company or related departments. Poplar Fruit still had a lot to do. Chapter 1419. Although Poplar Fruit was extremely busy at school, he still managed to squeeze out 3 days to accompany his daughter on her 6th trip to a father's place. The trip this time was at Nanhu, which was also very close to Guangdong province. However, to Lu Yi, it was a trip that touched his soul. 17 years ago, Lu Ye's first movie, which was also the movie that made him famous after being nominated for the Golden Rooster Award for Best Supporting Actor, was filmed in Yuan's ancient Miao village. The production team had chosen this place with great care. Even Lu Yi did not know about it beforehand. He had even forgotten that this place was the old haunt where his dream began 17 years ago. Revisiting the old haunt, there were a lot of sighs, many emotional and touching scenes. Especially when Lu Yi brought his son to live in the house, where he used to film under the arrangement of the production team. Lu Yi lay down on the bed while the camera traveled back in time to the past. The feeling of time and space intertwining and no longer existing was touching from the bottom of one's heart. Back then, Lu Yi was still a young man. He was also acting as someone else's son. Now, the mountain was still there, and that person was already a father. So, was the main character of this trip Lu Yi? Of course not. The memory was just a small Easter egg. Into Yuan's ancient Miao village, the production team continued to torture the fathers with all kinds of games and competitions. Of course, Poplar Fruit felt that the most meaningful part of this episode was the role-playing mission on the 2nd day. This role-playing was not referring to the 3rd day, where they had to dress up as anime characters and act mysterious. Instead, the children and the fathers had to split up and go deep into different jobs to experience the hardships of working at the bottom of society. Poplar Fruit and Xian had to go to the barbershop to learn how to cut hair by hand from the master. Meanwhile, Kiki followed Dejun, Lin Yongjian, and Zhou Shimin to the brickyard to move bricks. It was unknown if the master of the barbershop did it on purpose. The tools they used were scissors and scrapers. They did not even have a pusher. Of course, it wasn't very retro. When Poplar Fruit was young in the countryside, he also had such an old master cut his hair. A highly skilled master could cut clean and refreshing hair with a pair of scissors, and it was indeed easier to use a hair clipper than a pair of scissors. Therefore, in the current era where hair salons were everywhere, hair clippers had become the first choice of hair clippers for hairdressing. However, if you went to those high-end hair salons or observed the work of very top hairdressers, it was easy to find that they still used scissors. A pair of delicate scissors was like an extension of their hands and thoughts. The customer's hair also changed into the shape in their mind under the swing of the scissors. Compared to that, the pusher was only a tool used by a small number of people when they needed to push a green head. The master taught Poplar Fruit step by step how to use scissors and comb to cut his hair. Little chubby Xian, on the other hand, experienced the old-fashioned perming method under the service of another master. Originally, Poplar Fruit should also try to curl his hair. In the end, because Poplar Fruit's hair was too short. He was used to having a buzz cut. He escaped the disaster. Using scissors to cut hair was not as easy to learn as Poplar Fruit thought. Even though Yangguo was already very talented, and his control over his muscles had already reached the level of minute detail, Yangguo could only awkwardly look at the sacrificing customer in front of him with a pair of scissors in his hand. He had no idea where to start. This was two different things from using a Miao Dao. A Miao Dao had its delicate parts, but compared to a small pair of scissors, it was still wide open. The customer's requirements were not high. Just make do with it. Cut it a little shorter. But how should he cut it a little shorter? He couldn't just pick up a strand of hair and cut half of it, right? In the past, when he cut Kiki's hair when she was young, Poplar Fruit directly covered it with a kettle lid and then cut off the bottom edge. But obviously, adult hair could not be done that way. And after the store manager taught so much, Poplar Fruit felt that it was still very difficult to connect the dots. What should he do? So hot, so hot. Xianxian muttered in a muffled voice. Poplar Fruit turned his head and smiled. Xianxian's hair had been rolled up by the hairdresser with a small roll of paper, and the granny-like master took out a steam towel from a big pot and directly covered Xianxian's small head. The steaming towel emitted a fragrance similar to that of roasted sweet potatoes. Xianxian was a little restless. He huffed and twisted, and even shouted, I'm roasted. Poplar Fruit looked and couldn't help but laugh. In the end, he was gently tapped on the shoulder by his grandpa master behind him. Don't look around. Do your thing. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. It's not hot. The granny-like master coaxed. Xianxian, who was slowly getting used to it, did indeed calm down. His small nose was still twitching, as if he wanted to eat after smelling the fragrance. All right, let's ignore this little foodie for now. Poplar Fruit calmed down and paid attention to the customer in front of him. Little master, are you reliable? This middle-aged customer was more interested in variety and happily chatted with Poplar Fruit. Big brother, don't worry. Today, you'll see how beautifully I tidy you up. Poplar Fruit laughed. He used the Guanxia style of Mandarin that he just learned and said, My family has a godly haircutting technique that has been passed down for thousands of years. Today, I took it out because I saw that you look kind. I don't serve ordinary people. Hearing Poplar Fruit's words, everyone laughed. This guy really dared to say that. This was the first time he used a pair of scissors to cut someone's head, right? Even when he was young, he didn't harm the girl in front of him like this. Xiao Han foolishly did this kind of bad thing when he was young. Of course, this was also to add some humor to the program. But when it came to cutting, Poplar Fruit didn't cut people as easily as he did with the Miao Dao. Poplar Fruit was seen holding a comb in one hand and scissors in the other. He was trembling as he combed twice, not daring to cut. Little master, you can do it. I don't blame you. The middle-aged man wanted to comfort Poplar Fruit, but his words sounded funny. Yangguo gathered her courage, calmed herself down, and began to snip. Snip, snip. Needless to say, Yangguo's cut was quite stylish. After that cut, he gradually regained his confidence, causing the sound of his scissors to become a string. After cutting, the hair fell down one after another, as if it was drizzling. However, the customer gradually felt that there was a problem. He took advantage of a gap to touch the back of his head and asked doubtfully, Little master, did you cut my hair unevenly? Ahem, it's okay. You can continue. Old Ping, I'll fix it for you later, and it'll be fine. Grandpa's master said calmly as he smoked. Well, Poplar Fruit's confidence in cutting didn't mean that he had broken through some technical bottleneck. He was still far from becoming a hairdresser. Chapter 1420. Mossy stone steps, smoky alleys, Miao Village in the South Lake, and more of the beauty of the small towns in the south. At the corner of the street, 2 feet, one big and one small, appeared in front of the audience. The audience, who were drinking water, could not help but spit it out. They laughed so hard that their stomachs were cramping. On the screen, the big and small duo appeared. Slippers and shorts, that was nothing. Looking at their upper bodies, they were wearing a colorful short jacket, which gave off a strong local flavor. Poplar Fruit and Xianxian were wearing special sunglasses. Poplar Fruit was wearing the classic round old man's sunglasses. Their hairstyles were also super cool. Xian's new compact curly hair, Poplar Fruit's side flattened watermelon skin, coupled with their weird outfits. It was as shocking as it could be. Poplar Fruit laughed and leaned back to back with Xian, making a classic pose of holding a gun with one hand in James Bond. This time, the audience, who did not laugh, also laughed. Well, after cooperating with the program team, Poplar Fruit quickly took Xian to get rid of the colorful short jacket. The two of them finished their tasks early and had an early lunch. Of course, Poplar Fruit was not willing to stay and rest. He missed Kiki, who was working in the brickyard, and Xian missed her father. So the two of them hit it off and decided to go to the brickyard together. Finally, they arrived at the brickyard. Poplar Fruit held Xian's hand and went in. Then, under the dim light, they found their daughter in the crowd. Kiki. Poplar Fruit's steady voice trembled. It was mainly because of his heartache. She was a beautiful little girl, but now she was wearing a mask, and her face was covered in dirt. How could he not feel heartache? Dad! Xian did not care. She cheered and rushed to Zhou Shimin, who was still holding a brick in his hand. Wait. My clothes are dirty. Zhou Shimin shouted, but Xian had already jumped on him. Papa! Kiki raised her head in surprise. Her eyes were as clear and beautiful as ever. Her voice was muffled because she was wearing a mask. The little girl was very excited to meet her father. When her father squatted down, she gave him a big hug. Of course, Poplar Fruit didn't care that his daughter had stained his clothes with brick dust. We move a lot. From here to there. It's not comfortable wearing a mask. The little girl was excited when she saw her father. She couldn't stop talking. Poplar Fruit couldn't stop laughing. He looked around and roughly understood the sweat his daughter and the other guests had put in. Zhou Shimin and Lin Yongjian rolled up their sleeves and worked hard to move the bricks. Kiki and Dejun helped them. They lifted the bricks from the ground and handed them to them. Dejun was so afraid of getting dirty, but he put in a lot of effort today and didn't mind at all. The electric tractor in front of them was already half loaded. According to Kiki, they had already sent out an entire vehicle. Of course, it was impossible to ask the children to do such a hard work all the time. They were too young, and they were exhausted after moving for a while. Originally, Kiki and Dejun were brought out to play by the daughter of the owner of the small brick factory. The factory was too small, and he was both the owner and the worker. However, after hearing about the little sister's story, the two children were very sensible and came back with the electric tractor. They helped finish the rest of the work. Come on, I'll help too. Poplar Fruit rolled up his sleeves and joined the ranks of moving bricks. Poplar Fruit also brought Xian. In this way, there were 3 pairs of father and son. Xian helped his father, and Kiki worked hard to help Poplar Fruit. The little girl was not weak like a girl at all. She worked hard to hand the bricks to her father. The audience applauded for these children. Good job. Finally, with everyone's efforts, the last truck of bricks was sent out by Poplar Fruit. Kiki's task was considered completed. Of course, everyone was not in a hurry to leave. They had a very simple lunch at the little sister's house. This simple was relative to the living standards of the guests. For the owner's daughter, the little sister's family who had been admitted to a university, they had already taken out the best ingredients at home to entertain the guests. And the little sister's cooking. You don't have to cook anymore. Poplar Fruit stopped the girl who wanted to cook another pot of rice and stir-fry dishes because of Poplar Fruit and Xian's arrival. He smiled and said, Xian and I have already eaten. Let's sit and chat. Poplar Fruit served Kiki and quickly finished the meal. After the little girl worked hard, her appetite increased and she ate quickly. After eating, she told her father about the little sister's situation. It turned out that although the little sister's father was the owner of a small brick factory, in fact, he earned very little money. After working for half a day, a truck of bricks only earned a few yuan. But the little sister was very optimistic. She smiled and told the children about her deeds. She told the children that because she was admitted to a university, she needed to spend more money. So, during the summer vacation, she helped her father earn money in the brick factory, but her father's burden became heavier. The father would grit his teeth and send his daughter to university no matter how hard it was. Perhaps this was the only way for them to change their lives. Poplar Fruit listened to his daughter's story and looked at the girl with big eyes who loved to smile across the table. Hearing other people pity her, the girl smiled embarrassedly, but her eyes were red. She should be 18 years old this year, right? But the children of the poor began to take charge of the family early. She did not go on a graduation trip, nor did she follow her friends to play. Instead, she began to think about her future and shoulder a heavy burden for her family. Even though the environment was bad, even though she was in a difficult situation, even though she could not afford to buy cosmetics or nice clothes, her eyes were filled with hope. Her face was blooming with love, and her smile was optimistic and warm. She's the one who's the best. Poplar Fruit had seen many children who were poorer than her, but this was the first time he had seen such an optimistic and cheerful girl from a poor family. Even the super sensible Xiong Xiaolin from the Xiong family village did not have such a smile filled with positive energy like this girl in front of him. Of course, she was not a very beautiful girl. She could not even be considered pretty, but her smile was definitely a radiant one that the audience would never forget. At this moment, the emotional Dejun had tears in his eyes. He held Lin Yongjian's hand and asked Lin Yongjian to leave the money to the little sister. Kiki obviously thought so too. She said so much because she wanted her father to help the little sister who had touched her. Every child was a kind angel. The audience in front of the TV felt especially deeply at this moment. Hearing the two children's choked voices, the little sister was also moved to tears. But she was crying while smiling. She was not smiling because she was proud, but because she was gratified and moved. She also did not want her tears to affect the efforts of others. However, Poplar Fruit understood that the little sister did not need money. She was already in university, and her family situation was not so bad that she needed others to help her. What she needed was to know that her efforts were rewarded with the love of others. With this touching and sincere support, he believed that her family would soon see the dawn of hope. Chapter 1421. Cosplay, also known as role-playing, was popular in Japan, the United States, and thousands of young men and women who loved anime, including China. However, Poplar Fruit helplessly discovered that the director of the recent episodes of the show, Where Did Dad Go?, was definitely a middle-aged man. The response to the old man's cosplay from the previous trip was very good. So this time, there was a new and even more exaggerated cosplay. Luyi was made into a demonic Guanyin bodhisattva, Hu Jun turned into a bull demon with an iron ring on his nose. Lin Yongjian was a hunchbacked earth eunuch, and Zhou Shimin was even more miserable. He carried a turtle shell and became a green ninja turtle. Under the banner of the show, Poplar Fruit was naturally not spared. He was directly stuffed into a sponge box, and, after a series of smears, he became SpongeBob SquarePants. Well, Poplar Fruit actually fooled the smart Kiki with such a clumsy cosplay. Using this opportunity, Poplar Fruit, as a SpongeBob SquarePants, chatted with his daughter a lot. The topics included love and respect for parents, friendship between friends. Seeing that his daughter did not recognize him and completely treated him as her favorite anime character, Poplar Fruit asked a question that he wanted to know very much. Kiki, your papa and Mama Ma are married. Do you feel unhappy? In order to pretend to be SpongeBob SquarePants, Poplar Fruit even imitated Kiki's tone of speak. This way, Kiki would feel very close and would not be suspicious. I don't think so. Why would I feel unhappy? Chi-Chi asked in confusion. In Kiki's pure mind, the little girl had never considered whether she did not like Fong Bei Bei as her stepmother. To her, Fong Bei Bei was both her sister and Mama Ma, so there was no problem with a stepmother. But let me tell you a secret. Kiki pulled on SpongeBob SquarePants' clothes and said, "What secret?" Poplar Fruit was a little frightened at this moment, and even his voice became deep. Every time the little girl wanted to tell him a secret, she would turn into an adorable little girl who would cheat her father. Fortunately, Kiki was excitedly sharing her little secret with SpongeBob SquarePants and didn't notice the problem with Poplar Fruit's voice. That's right. My papa and Mama Ma are actually going to have a big wedding. It didn't happen before, so it was changed to next year. Kiki waved her hands and drew a big circle. These words were a little ambiguous and would probably cause controversy after the broadcast. Of course, Poplar Fruit knew what his daughter meant. He had a headache, but he had to explain the secret to the audience. "You're talking about a big wedding. Are you talking about a big wedding?" Yangwa asked. Yes, yes. The little girl nodded fiercely and said, "Sister Shanshan bought me a super beautiful dress, but I couldn't wear it." Kiki felt a little regretful. She gestured her height and said, "Papa said that I grew very fast, and I can't wear the beautiful clothes I bought before. Then wait until next year. I can't wear my dress either." "It doesn't matter. You can still buy new ones in the future. The new dress will definitely be more beautiful than the one you have now." Poplar Fruit stretched out his other hand and patted his daughter's shoulder gently to comfort her. In his prop suit, the left hand was the thumb and the right hand was the palm, so it was impossible to make other gestures. I think so too." The little girl had a good attitude. "Actually, I think that your papa's wedding didn't happen because of his injury. He probably didn't want to change the time at the last minute, right? He had already prepared so much." Poplar Fruit explained. "Yes, my papa was injured. He was so pitiful. He slept in bed for a long time." Kiki held her hands to her heart and said with some lingering fear, "But my papa is super powerful. He woke up very quickly. Grandpa Doctor said that papa is a miracle." Poplar Fruit gently stroked his daughter's hair with his palm and said lovingly, "Of course, your papa has to recover quickly because he still has to protect you." The little girl smiled sweetly and was slightly shy. "Then are you happy now? Papa's body has recovered, and then he can come out to play with you." Poplar Fruit asked. "I'm happy. SpongeBob SquarePants, wait a minute. Let's go back together, okay?" Kiki was worried that SpongeBob SquarePants would be afraid, so she quickly took his hand and said, "Don't be afraid. My papa is a very good person, and you're my good friend. He will definitely like you." It was impossible for them to meet. Poplar Fruit had already become SpongeBob SquarePants, so it was impossible for him to change into himself and meet her. He waved his hand and said, "I'm sorry, Kiki. I'm afraid I can't meet your father. I can't stay outside for a long time. Soon, I will have to go back to the sea." In fact, Poplar Fruit was worried that his daughter would cry because she did not want SpongeBob SquarePants to leave. However, Poplar Fruit did not see that Kiki was very sad. She pondered for a moment and nodded her head in realization. The little girl had a deep understanding expression and said, "I know, SpongeBob SquarePants, you can't stay on the ground for too long. That way, you will die from lack of water." Yes, yes, that's the reason." Well, Kiki had found a reason for herself, so Poplar Fruit didn't have to worry about it anymore. He said with a smile. This was actually what Kiki had learned from watching cartoons. When SpongeBob SquarePants ran to land, he would indeed dry up and die. Then SpongeBob SquarePants, hurry up and go back. Hurry up and go back. The kind-hearted Chi-Chi became anxious. She quickly stood up and pushed Yangwa's costume. "Wait a minute. There's no need to be too anxious. I still have a little time before I have to go back to the sea," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "I have another question to ask you." "Okay, ask away. But when it's time, you have to go home obediently." The little girl turned around and lectured her father. "Your papa and mama are getting married. If they want to have a child, will you be unhappy?" Poplar Fruit had always wanted to ask this question. It just so happened that he could ask it through SpongeBob SquarePants. "No. Why would I be unhappy?" Kiki had a puzzled expression again. "Because many children don't like them to have a second child." Poplar Fruit didn't let go of this question easily this time. He spread out his hands and said, "Because they think that if Papa and Mama give birth to a second child, Papa and Mama won't like them anymore." I'm not afraid. You all want to lie to children." The little girl said with a smile, "My Papa and Mama won't dislike me. They all love me very much. Yes, you have to believe in this." Poplar Fruit was a little moved, and his voice trembled a little. Yes, there's more. SpongeBob SquarePants, let me tell you, I really want a younger brother or sister. Kiki whispered into SpongeBob SquarePants' ear. After saying that, the little girl giggled. Under the sunlight that broke through the fog in the morning, her smile was so sincere and sweet. Chapter 1422. In the end, Poplar Fruit did not reveal SpongeBob SquarePants' true identity, just like how Lu Yi did not reveal that Guanyin Pusa was himself. Both of them wanted to leave a precious memory for their child. The sixth trip ended with a warm and emotional scene. Poplar Fruit and Kiki returned to Guangzhou and continued working on his Eurasian studies. Of course, Kiki had to continue attending kindergarten, and Fong Beibei had to start her postgraduate studies. She was not as free as Poplar Fruit. However, Poplar Fruit had returned with a mission this time. After recording the show, producer Xie and the village chief had given them a mission. That was to invite a celebrity from the entertainment industry to participate in the next trip, which meant that they would be guests. This was a rare favor that the production team had given to the fathers. One had to know that a national-level variety show like Where's Dad Go had received so much attention from the audience that it was unknown how many movie and television crews wanted to invite people to participate in the promotion. This was also because the guests on Where's Dad Go were more fixed, and there were almost no guests. That was why the production team did not give them any slips. However, every celebrity who could be on Where's Dad Go would receive a lot of attention. For example, last season's Wang Bai and Tong Dawei had gone to New Zealand to participate in the program's recording in order to promote their movie, Darling. Running Man was also a national-level variety show. Not only were there all kinds of guests vying to be on it, the few fixed guests on Running Man had also gained a lot of popularity. They had received so many movie invitations that their hands had gone limp. Of course, the production team did not say that any Tom, Dick, or Harry could be on the show. For the fixed guests to invite guests, the list of people had to be approved by the production team. Speaking of the invited guests, Poplar Fruit immediately thought of one person, Chen. When Poplar Fruit was hospitalized in Beijing, Chen had come to visit him. He had said that he was filming a movie. Unexpectedly, a movie that was going to be released on the big screen. Only Poplar Fruit, who did not do anything, did not know about this. The preparation for this movie began in April last year. Later, they finally started production with Han, whom they had worked with before. Yao Shou was the director. He never expected that most of the original cast and many movie actors would join this movie. In terms of momentum, it could not be compared to the movies of many directors and actors who had achieved before. However, Chen still pushed back his schedule for half a year to join the parent company's annual blockbuster. He and Baiku were both important protagonists. When Poplar Fruit was injured, the movie was in full swing. Chen was still able to ask for leave to visit him, which made Poplar Fruit very gratified. Later, Poplar Fruit recovered from his injuries and returned to Yangcheng. It was already late August, and the movie was finally completed. Calling Beast and the others brought Che and Juan to Yangcheng to visit Poplar Fruit again. This friendship and camaraderie touched Poplar Fruit so much that he didn't want to reject it. Therefore, when the production team mentioned this matter, Poplar Fruit immediately thought of Che and Juan. After receiving Poplar Fruit's name list, producer Xie was not surprised. He knew about the relationship between Poplar Fruit and the country's new popular actor, Che and Juan. After some comparison, producer Xie realized that Che and Juan was really suitable for the theme of their next trip. Didn't Che and Juan become famous after filming a period drama, After Unexpectedly? That guy was extraordinarily handsome when he wore ancient clothes. His aquiline nose quickly helped him attract a large number of female fans. After returning, Poplar Fruit contacted Che and Juan and called Che and Juan, who was on vacation in his hometown in Yangcheng, over. He invited a few good friends to have an outdoor barbecue and told them about this matter. Sure enough, not only did Che and Juan agree, he was also very surprised. There were not many opportunities to appear in front of a national audience like this, especially when his own work was about to be released. Che and Juan was almost grateful to Poplar Fruit. He felt that this was another support from Poplar Fruit. Although Chang-Yuan was already a second-tier film and television actor, he had experienced a lot of hardships since he was young. He had always placed himself in a very low position, especially when facing a benefactor like Poplar Fruit who had helped him greatly, like a life mentor. Moreover, this year's Poplar Fruit was already a popular figure. He was popular all over the world. After calculating the time, after this episode's recording, the broadcast should be in mid-October. There was still a long time before the month of promotion before the movie was released. However, no matter what, this was a very good opportunity. Not to mention promotion, it was good to warm up. Che and Yuan immediately called Wan He and Tianyi in Beijing and asked them to discuss the specific details of the cooperation with Mango TV. Che and Yuan could not hold back and rushed back to Beijing the next day. He was also considered a workaholic. After all, he did not have any relatives to take care of. As for Poplar Fruit, after a week of peace, he was about to begin his 7th journey. Of course, this was also the second to last journey. He suddenly felt that time had passed very quickly. Everyone had just gathered together for the first time in May. In the blink of an eye, it was almost time for the program to end. Of course, it did not mean that everyone would not be friends after the program ended. After so many episodes of the program's recording, Poplar Fruit and Kiki had formed deep friendships with the other 4 pairs of father and son. And because the 5 families in this season were not the type to be blinded by greed, none of them treated the recording of the program as a stepping stone to fame. Instead, they saw it as a rare opportunity to bring their children out to play while working. Of course, this also had to do with the fact that the 5 guests had been famous for a long time, especially Liu Yi, Hu Jun, and Lin Yongjian. They had a wide range of acting careers and had achieved great things. They did not need a small bonus from the program to increase their qualifications. Poplar Fruit did not need to be mentioned. He had no intention of joining the entertainment industry. He was only here to accompany his daughter to play. No matter what, after the program's recording, they would still be good brothers. Kiki and the other 4 children would also still be good friends. However, for the new journey, it seemed like the program team was going to create some trouble. The night before the departure, Poplar Fruit and Kiki received the mission card and the props and costumes sent by the program team at home. Please were the costumes provided by the program team, and take the public transportation system to reach the portal of time. Poplar Fruit finished reading and looked at the cameraman in confusion. Where is the portal of time? On the other side, Fong Beibei and Kiki curiously opened the costumes sent by the program team. Fong Beibei burst out laughing. She covered her mouth and grabbed Poplar Fruit's arm, saying, "Uncle, look, you're going to cosplay again." Chapter 1423. She was really addicted to cosplay. Poplar Fruit was speechless as he looked at the costume that was obviously from the Qing dynasty. Of course, he didn't know that the next 2 or 3 days would be cosplay. Poplar Fruit almost spat out blood. Can't you come up with something new? Early the next morning, Poplar Fruit and his daughter dressed up. Yanghua was wearing a plain Mandarin jacket and linen trousers. Although he was carrying a small bag and his outfit was very rustic, when he wore it on the tall Yanghua, he looked like a well-hidden, of course, it could be seen at a glance, martial arts expert. Kiki was wearing a Manchurian Qing dynasty dress. Of course, the color was not very bright. She was wearing a navy blue low-collar gown with white cuffs and a cyan satin skirt. The simple and plain clothes matched the little girl's extraordinary face. She was like a Chinese Manchurian Qing version of Cinderella. "Why don't you dress like a princess this time?" "I like to wear a princess dress." The little girl put on her clothes, bounced on the sofa, and said to her father with a smile. She mischievously said a few words, but her tone didn't mean that she wanted to wear a princess dress. "Who said you're not like a princess? You're a princess." Poplar Fruit said to his daughter with a smile, "Do you still remember the story of Little Swallow? You're the little princess who lived among the common people." "Oh, I remember. When Kiki and her father went back to their hometown, they watched the antique costume TV series Princess Pearl with their grandparents. Although they didn't finish watching it and only watched a few episodes, she still knew the identity of Little Swallow. Then, "Papa, Are you the emperor? Poplar Fruit grinned and said, Yes, but Papa can't reveal his identity now. You see, Papa, and you can only wear such clothes. We have to keep a low profile. So, we're on a very mysterious mission. The little girl held her small face in surprise, but then looked around, afraid of being heard, so she asked in a low voice. That's right. Poplar Fruit gave him a thumbs up. After he finished packing, he picked up the luggage prepared by Fong Bei Bei. Fong Bei Bei had already gone to class, so he was alone. He brought his daughter and ran towards the so-called Gate of Time. In the end, he was told that the Gate of Time was in the famous film city in Jiangnan. All right, the production crew really liked to torment people. They actually had to wear such clothes. First, they had to take the subway to the airport. Then, they had to wear such clothes and take the plane to Jiangnan. Poplar Fruit felt like he was going to be laughed at on the way there. Holding his daughter's hand, Poplar Fruit embarked on the journey of being watched slowly. They hadn't even left the neighborhood yet. On the way, they were spotted by a few neighbors. They were fine, as they were all people of status and quality. They waved their hands to greet them, then hid to the side. They didn't make a sound and only mouthed. Are you recording where Daddy is going? Poplar Fruit smiled and nodded at them and waved his hand. But when they were outside, Yang Guo could no longer be the center of attention, especially in the crowded subway in Yangqing. Along the way, many people were looking at Poplar Fruit and Kiki. Many people were able to quickly identify Poplar Fruit and Kiki. Most of them were fine, as they took out their phones and secretly took photos from afar. A few were very bold and ran over to Poplar Fruit to ask for his autograph. Hey, you see, I am not a singer nor an actor. I'm also not a big star. Why do you want my autograph? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. He handed Kiki over to the staff to help take care of her. Although he said that, he didn't put on airs. He still took my daughter's notebook and seriously signed his name on it. He had even used the clerical calligraphy that he had learned from his professor when he was studying for his Ph.D. in the Chinese department. The strokes were firm and beautiful. Of course, it was also very slow. Otherwise, Poplar Fruit's hands would have been tired from signing autographs on the subway. On the subway, some fans couldn't wait to get off. In the end, a few my daughter who had nothing to do escorted Poplar Fruit and Kiki to the airport. You have to study hard. Poplar Fruit and Kiki said goodbye to the group of fans. Kiki also waved her hand obediently and said sweetly, Goodbye, sister. Poplar Fruit dressed up like this and still managed to get on the plane. It seemed that the program team put in a lot of effort. After getting on the plane, Poplar Fruit was still surrounded by onlookers, but it was much better than on the subway. Kiki didn't have to hide behind her father shyly. Finally, Poplar Fruit and the others arrived at the film city. The car passed through one imitation building after another and finally arrived at the super huge Ming and Qing Palace. Poplar Fruit held his daughter's hand and walked in. He introduced to his daughter. It is said that this is an imitation of the Forbidden City. Except for the antiques, everything else is exactly the same as the real one. What do you mean by one-to-one? Kiki was very smart, but Poplar Fruit didn't let the little girl come in contact with too much knowledge beyond her level. It means that it looks the same as it did before. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, You've been to the Forbidden City before. Don't you think it's as big as the Forbidden City? Yes, it's super huge. Kiki kept looking left and right, and her eyes couldn't stop looking. She suddenly shouted as if she had discovered a new continent. Papa, look, the village chief. I see the village chief. Poplar Fruit and Kiki were the first to arrive, so they were the first to greet the village chief, who had become uniquely. However, before they could say anything to the village chief, the other children also arrived. The second to arrive was the cold and aloof Kong Kong. He wore an official's robe and walked over proudly with Hu Jun, who had been reduced to a guard with a sword. Kiki ran over happily and wanted to hold Brother Kong Kong's hand. However, Kong Kong ignored her coldly and had a mysterious smile on his face. However, Kiki didn't want to be spoiled by Brother Kong Kong's coldness. The little girl's strength was there, so when she reached out to grab his hand, Kong Kong could only obediently let her hold his hand. The little girl didn't take this half-forced, half-pushed hand-holding seriously. She smiled and pulled Brother Kong Kong's hand, wanting to walk forward together. Of course, Kong Kong refused in his heart. However, before he could resist, another child came. Furthermore, it was Kiki's other good friend, Noa-E. Chi-Chi was overjoyed as she released Big Brother Kong Kong's hand. Pulling her skirt, she jogged away, leaving Chairman Kong Kong alone in the wind. The other children arrived one after another. Noa-E, who became the little Ah brother, Xian, who became the crown prince, and Jun, who became a pitiful beggar. However, the situation wasn't as happy as the children imagined. The moment it started, the situation took a turn for the worse. Suddenly, a group of aggressive Imperial guards came and directly pressed Poplar Fruit to the ground. With a snap, shackles were put on him. Chapter 1424. Sweat. What's going on? Poplar Fruit knew the person in the lead. He was Che-Jun. Don't be fooled by the fact that he was tall, dressed like Hu Jun, and mixed in with a group of bodyguards. Yanghua, who was caught, raised his head and saw Che-Jun looking at him with a smile in his eyes. Kiki, who just ran to the village head's side, was a little confused. She didn't know what was going on. She thought it was a joke. Take him away. Che-Jun roared. A group of extras dragged Poplar Fruit outside. Poplar Fruit saw Che-Jun winking at him. Naturally, he knew that the program crew was tormenting him. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry and shook his head. He pretended to struggle desperately, but he didn't use any strength. Instead, he followed the footsteps of the people who were grabbing him. Help! Help me! I'm innocent! Why did you catch me? Poplar Fruit's shouts were very effective. His sorrowful voice made people feel a little sorry for him. At this time, Kiki finally reacted. The little girl pouted, lifted her skirt, and quickly ran over. Halfway, she was intercepted by Che-Jun. Kiki waved her little fist and hit Che-Jun's stomach. Her eyes began to turn red, and her voice was a little choked as she said, "Let go of my papa! Don't catch my papa!" And, fortunately, Che-Jun was trained. Otherwise, if his stomach was hammered by Kiki's little hand, even an adult wouldn't be able to withstand it. Kiki was very strong. We caught him because he committed a crime. Che-Jun saw that his little niece was about to cry, and his heart didn't feel good. However, he could only hold back his laughter and said seriously, "Kiki, I didn't do anything. Save me." Poplar Fruit looked at his daughter pitifully. He finally understood why he was dressed so plainly. It turned out that he was used to be caught. "My papa is a good person. You got the wrong person." When Kiki heard her father's words, she immediately struggled. The little girl's eyes were filled with tears. She really wanted to save her father. "Kiki, let us help you." At this time, Kong Kong, who was wearing an official's uniform, and the beggar, Jun, who was carrying a dog-beating stick, swaggered over. "Kiki, tell them that I didn't do anything wrong, that I'm a good person." Poplar Fruit shouted pitifully as he knelt on the ground while being surrounded by a group of people. I told you, but it's useless." Chi-Chi was blocked by Che-Jun, so she didn't recognize Che-Jun, who had changed his clothes for a moment. Pleading for leniency was useless, and his martial prowess was too weak. The little girl cried until her eyes were full of tears. She clutched her hands, looking very pitiful. "Did you wet your pants last night?" Kong Kong didn't seem to be here to save people. He seemed to be here to tear down the stage. Although he was cold, his words were shocking, but they seemed to be very harmonious. Che-Jun, this guy, could actually keep a straight face. After hearing Kong Kong's words, he seemed to ponder for a moment and said seriously, "Yes, he wet his pants last night. I didn't wet my pants." Poplar Fruit was so angry that he laughed. Che-Jun, this guy, actually said that he wet his pants, but it seemed to be quite effective. Although it caused the adults to laugh, it was obvious that the few children were scared. "Those who wet their pants will be taken away." Che-Jun let go of the frightened Kiki and let her stand with her friends. He returned to the middle of the group, waved his hand, and said in a loud voice. Poplar Fruit also had fun. Scenes from the previous episodes flashed through his mind. He saw Poplar Fruit struggling to be taken away, and then suddenly shouted, Xian Xian, you have to be careful too. On the other side, Crown Prince Xian Xian indeed became nervous. He cried as he pulled his father's hand and said anxiously, Woo-woo, I don't want. But under Kiki's sad and pitiful little eyes, Poplar Fruit was taken away by a group of side guards and Chen Yuan. The little girl was left standing alone in the wide square, wiping her tears. Fortunately, there was a group of uncles asking the village chief how to save her father. The helpless little girl looked at the village chief pitifully. On the other side, after Poplar Fruit and Che and Yuan left Kiki's sight, the side guards let go of their hands. Che and Yuan also smiled and patted Poplar Fruit's shoulders and knees, but had no intention of releasing Poplar Fruit's shackles. Poplar Fruit, I'm sorry. This is the request of the program team. This suddenly caught me for no reason, Sai. Poplar Fruit, of course, did not care. He smiled and said, They almost scared me. Fortunately, he did not start fighting. Otherwise, with his skills, even if Che and Yuan was in front of him, these side guard would not be enough. You're lucky, Che and Yuan said with a smile. I just heard the director say that beggars are not allowed to enter the palace. Teacher Lin and the others will be kicked out later. Without saying much, they came to the front of the dungeon. Poplar Fruit received Che and Yuan's explanation of the next part of the script. Someone went out to take a look and suddenly ran back. She's here. She's here. Kiki is here. Several guards quickly supported Poplar Fruit and made him kneel on the ground. Poplar Fruit stretched his neck, and then Che and Yuan pulled out a long knife and waved it on Poplar Fruit's neck. She's here. Kiki appeared at the door. Don't cut off my head. I really didn't wet the bed yesterday. Poplar Fruit cried. No, don't kill my papa. Kiki cried until her eyes were blurred. She ran over, but when she saw that her father was about to die, she hurriedly lifted her skirt and rushed over. She hugged her father, who was still shackled, and pitifully turned her head to look at the bad guy with the knife. Poplar Fruit felt the cold tears on his daughter's face. He couldn't bear it, but this play still had to go on. Che and Yuan threw the knife away. According to the script, he let go of his indifference, squatted down, gently held Kiki's waist, and said, Oh, such a lovely girl. Why are you crying? Are you acting in a play? But Kiki didn't know. She thought that she still had a little use. The little girl wiped her tears with both hands and cried, Please, let my papa go, okay? My papa is a good person, really. But he wet the bed. Che and Yuan explained. My papa didn't wet the bed. He really didn't wet the bed. Kiki cried. How do you know he didn't wet the bed? Che and Yuan asked. Because maybe I wet the bed. Kiki cried and said in fear, My papa won't wet the bed. You wet the bed? Che and Yuan pretended to be surprised. But I haven't wet the bed for a long time. Kiki wiped her tears and said miserably, If it was you, then I would have arrested you. Che and Yuan deliberately rubbed his chin and asked, Did I really catch the wrong person? Chapter 1425. Che and Yuan was really too much. Why did he have to make such a lovely girl cry? God knows how many viewers behind the screen were going to fight for justice for Chi-Chi. Seeing Kiki crying even more sadly, Poplar Fruit quickly made up a melodramatic plot. No, my daughter didn't wet the bed. If you want to arrest someone, arrest me. Papa. Kiki didn't know if she was moved or scared. She cried and hugged her father, holding her father's hand, as if she was worried that her father would leave. At this time, Che and Yuan also felt that he had attracted too much hatred. He didn't dare to play the cold guard captain anymore. He half squatted and said to Kiki, Tell Uncle the truth. Was it you or your father who wet the bed? I didn't wet the bed, and then my papa also didn't wet the bed. The little girl sobbed and said, Can you let go of my papa? Not yet. We haven't found out who wet the bed, so we can't let him go. Che and Yuan saw that Kiki was about to cry again, so he quickly added, But I can spare his life. Come on, take Poplar Fruit to the prison and wait for the trial. And so, Chi-Chi watched tearfully as her father was escorted into the dark prison. Kiki saved Dad. Although Poplar Fruit was locked in the prison, he still shouted loudly, It's okay, don't cry. Che and Jun seemed to no longer be the guard captain, but a caring big brother, and said, "He's okay. We'll give you an answer after the investigation. But, I don't want my papa to be locked up." The little girl's face was full of tears. She grabbed a tissue and cried. "You don't have to worry about him. He's very comfortable in there." Che and Jun said, "Listen, he said it's like a hotel. La la la, la la." As soon as Che and Jun spoke, poplar fruit shouts came from the small prison. "Kiki, come and save me. I don't want to stay here. There are rats in here. It's so scary." Poplar fruit was also good at pretending. There were no rats in the prison. The prison was divided into several cells. There was only one cellmate in his cell. Although his hair was a little long and his clothes were a little tattered, he was still very clean. He even greeted him as soon as he came in. To cover up his lie, Che and Jun purposely squeaked to cover up Poplar Fruit's voice. Then he said, "Look at how happy your father is." Kiki was a little confused. She looked at Che and Jun innocently and pouted. "But I heard everything." At this time, Kiki suddenly felt that Che and Jun looked familiar. She frowned slightly and wiped away her tears. She stared at Che and Jun with her reddened eyes, which made Che and Jun a little flustered. "I know." Kiki suddenly pouted and said angrily, "I know your Uncle Che." Che and Jun panicked. He didn't expect Kiki to find out at this time. He was a little hesitant. But Uncle Che, why did you catch my papa? Aren't you good friends?" Kiki asked while sobbing. Looking at the little girl's big, tearful eyes, Che and Jun suddenly felt that he was the biggest sinner in the world. Che and Jun coughed and took a tissue to wipe Kiki's tears. "Kiki, you're mistaken. I'm bodyguard Che, not your Uncle Che. But you look like him, and your voice is also very similar." Kiki sobbed and said, "Uncle Che, can you let go of my papa? I beg you." Ouch. Che and Jun had a headache. He hesitated and said, "Actually, I just look like your Uncle Che. I'm not your Uncle Che. How about this? Don't cry. Uncle Che, no. Bodyguard Che will go with you to see your papa. Let's see if there's any way to save your father, okay?" Kiki's eyes immediately lit up. She nodded her head hopefully. Just as they entered the prison, the prisoners in the cell next to them stretched out their black hands, howled, and made a terrifying sound. Kiki was so scared that she turned around and ran away. Che and Jun also quickly chased after her. "Kiki, what's wrong with you?" "I'm scared." You tell them not to stretch out their hands. Then don't talk." The little girl was so scared that she was about to cry. She said while choking with sobs. The little girl's appearance was really serious. She made a request to the bodyguard captain. Then, not only the audience, but even Che and Jun couldn't help but look up to the sky and grin when Kiki wasn't looking. Kiki, don't ignore me. Come and save me. Father wants to see you." The moment Yang Guo saw his daughter running away with her hair, he started to shout again. Of course, the cellmate next to him also asked questions randomly. Poplar Fruit casually answered 2 of his questions, but it attracted more questions. This must be the program group's plan. Poplar Fruit suddenly thought of Tang Sanzang, played by Luo Jiaying. At this time, hearing her father's call, Kiki finally plucked up the courage to go to the prison cell to see her father. When she overcame her fear, the little girl found that the terrible black hands were gone. Of course they were gone. They were still quarreling. How could the program be recorded? Suddenly, there was a riot. Che and Jun's hands were caught by Poplar Fruit's cellmate. Of course, Poplar Fruit also helped. He pulled Che and Jun's sleeves and tied a knot. However, this cellmate was actually unreliable. After he tied the knot, he laughed and teased Kiki. "Please, let my papa out, okay?" Kiki begged pitifully. She found that this grandfather with messy hair seemed to be the most powerful person. "Then you have to answer my question. Do you like your father?" The cellmate began to steal the show. "Yes, I do. Can you give me the key?" Kiki looked at him expectantly. The others didn't say anything. They just watched with a smile. This must be good material. "Yes, but you have to go back to my question. Do you like your mother?" "I like her too. Can you give me the key?" "Please, my papa really didn't wet the bed." Kiki begged pitifully. "But you have to answer my question first. Do you like your father or your mother more?" He really had a lot of questions. Poplar Fruit had tried before. "I like both. Kiki was not fooled. Can you get it to me? You're a good person. Ahem, one more question. Who is your mother's father's daughter's daughter? This walk-on actor actually asked a long series of tongue-twisting questions. Even the audience couldn't react in time. But Poplar Fruit snickered in his heart. Testing my daughter? You really haven't seen the genius of the Yang family. That's me. Sure enough, Kiki answered without hesitation. Chapter 1426. The little girl's pure heart made people have a whole new level of respect for her, and that Tang Sanzang inmate was still there deceiving Kiki to let Kiki answer more questions. It was believed that at this time, many of the audience had a face full of smiles and then clenched their fists, wanting to jump into the screen and beat him up. Poplar Fruit also couldn't stand it anymore. He coughed twice and said, Kiki, don't be fooled by him. If he had the key, he would have already gotten out. Otherwise, why would he be locked up here with Dad? The little girl was stunned for a moment, and then turned to look at Che Enjuan, who had already taken the opportunity to break free. She put her palms together, very pitifully looked at Che Enjuan, and said, Uncle Che, I beg you, let go of my dad, okay? Cough. I'm not your Uncle Che. Che Enjuan, of course, couldn't be cold to the little girl. He squatted down and softly said to Kiki, Well, if you perform well, your dad can be released sooner. Then what should I do? Kiki asked nervously. Let's go, let's talk outside. Che Enjuan picked up Kiki. Kiki, you have to work hard, perform well, and get Dad out of here as soon as possible. Poplar Fruit grabbed the cell door and tried his best to act. I know. The little girl also waved at her father, her little face full of determination. Outside the door, Che Enjuan put down Kiki. He was very gentle. After all, they were acquaintances, and Che Enjuan also watched Kiki grow up. That year, they even made an unexpected micro-movie together. Kiki, you have to take my saber and stand here. Che Enjuan looked at his little niece as if he was looking at his own daughter, full of love, but he couldn't let Kiki feel that he was too friendly. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to continue the act later. Kiki took the saber and obediently stood at the door of the prison with the two guards in yellow jackets. But she was looking at Che Enjuan suspiciously. What are you looking at me for? Che Enjuan couldn't help but ask. I feel like you're my Uncle Che. The little girl muttered, My Uncle Che also hugged me like you. The little girl was very smart. Che Enjuan's face was covered in sweat. He had been squatting all this time, maintaining a height that was not too different from Chi-Chi's. He smiled and said, All right, let's not care about whether Uncle Che is Uncle Che or not. You need to stand guard obediently and not let the bad guys in. This way your father will be released sooner. I will be very obedient. The little girl stood upright with her saber in one hand. She looked very valiant, just like the military posture she had learned during military training. Kiki, you're the best. Che Enjuan smiled. He was no longer as majestic as before. Instead, he had become Kiki's sidekick. He pulled a long face and said, Are you thirsty? Shall I get you a drink? Sure, I want to drink it. The little girl nodded and said. She didn't seem to be so scary now. The smart little girl began to figure out something. Che Enjuan eagerly brought it to Kiki and even helped her insert the straw. This attentive performance made the fans who had turned into haters start to change their minds. It seems that he's not that bad. Kiki sucked on the cuckoo star while looking at Che Enjuan with her beautiful black pearl-like eyes. She said, Uncle Che, can you also give this milk to my papa to drink? I'm afraid that he's thirsty. He was injured before, and he just recovered. Okay, no problem. Che Enjuan quickly ran in with a bottle of milk and handed it to Poplar Fruit, who was being tortured by his long-winded cellmate. He casually said, Your daughter gave it to me. Then he ran out. This guy, if he got married and had children, he would definitely be a child slave. His concern and love for Kiki were all expressed on his face. When he came back, he faced Kiki, who was rolling her eyes and staring at him. Why do you keep looking at me like this? Che Enjuan touched his face and asked, Your Uncle Che. Kiki pouted her small mouth and unhappily said, Just now you said yes. Che Enjuan thought for a moment and realized that he was careless just now and stepped into Kiki's trap. He blushed with shame and reached out to touch Kiki's cute little head with two pigtails. He smiled and said, "Okay, I admit, I'm your Uncle Che. Then why did you catch my papa? You're still lying," the little girl angrily asked, looking at her pure eyes. Even if she knew that he was acting, Che and Juan suddenly felt a sense of guilt flooding over him like a mountain and a sea. It's my fault, it's my fault." Che and Juan raised his hands and feet and said, "Okay, I'll be honest. Uncle Che was actually carrying out a mission in the game, just like your father. Your father was locked up. This is the requirement of the game. It needs you to work hard and then let your father out." Che and Juan said, Then I've been very obedient. Can you let go of my papa?" Kiki put on a pitiful look and said to Che and Juan, You and my papa are good friends. Can you let him go?" Che and Juan was about to say something when suddenly a group of people came over. The palace maids chattered noisily as they swarmed around him. The scale was huge. The person in the lead had an outstanding temperament and was dressed like a graceful and rich empress. The audience, who often watched TV series, immediately recognized her. Isn't this Ning Jean? That year, Sunny Days made her famous. Then, she starred in The New Beach with Liu Tian-wong and her brother. She also starred in movies like Gun Hunt, Love Call Shift, Founding a Nation, and so on. She was definitely a veteran actor that everyone was familiar with. Of course, Ning Jean was also brought here by another veteran actor, Lin Yongjian. Seeing Ning Jean, Che and Juan hurriedly ran up according to the script, knelt down, and said in a particularly flattering voice, "Oh, Imperial Concubine Ning, you came?" Kiki was a bit confused. This new Imperial Concubine Ning was someone that Kiki had never seen before. She foolishly grabbed Che and Juan's sword and stood at the door at a loss. What a lovely girl. Half of Ning Jin's acting, half of Ning Jean really liked her. She squatted down and sweetly held Kiki's hand and asked, "Can you tell Imperial Concubine Ning what's her name?" After talking for a while, Kiki, who felt that a great person had come, began to beg pitifully, "Imperial Concubine Ning, can you please let my father go?" Imperial Concubine Ning brought Kiki to Poplar Fruit. When Poplar Fruit saw a newcomer, he quickly ran to the prison door to ask for help. "It's not impossible to let you go." Ning Jean pinched his orchid fingers and said in a tired voice, "But our family doesn't have such a big power. I'll bring your daughter into the palace. Whether you can come out or not, it depends on your daughter's performance." Chapter 14:27. Kiki had been abducted by Ning Jean, but Poplar Fruit was not afraid. Although it was the first time they met, Ning Jean knew how much he liked Kiki when he saw her beaming with joy. But after his daughter left, Poplar Fruit could only stay alone in the prison. Actually, there was no problem staying in the prison. The bed was clean, and it was quite comfortable to lie down. There was no need to rush the filming. But how could there be such a good thing? Poplar Fruit had just sat down when he saw the long-haired extras grinning and coming over. "Hey, can you chat with me for a while? I've been locked up for decades, and no one has ever chatted with me." Poplar Fruit rolled his eyes and looked helplessly at the guy who had been chatting with him for half an hour. He didn't know where the program team found this weirdo, but he could talk for half a day and not repeat the same thing. But the main thing was that the topics he talked about were very common and boring. Poplar Fruit felt that his IQ would be lower by chatting with such a guy. Right, IQ. Poplar Fruit looked at the other party with an evil smile. He put his hands on the shoulders of the Tang Sanzang's cellmate and said, "How about this? Since it's boring anyway, it's better to learn than to chat. In the future, when you get out, you can have another skill to make a living. Let's learn Hindi." Coincidentally, Poplar Fruit had recently been arranging Hindi as a minor course for students. Hindi was relatively popular because domestic manufacturers had recently begun to plan for Hindi in Africa. Learning Hindi would definitely be of great help to them in finding jobs in the future. Tang Sanzang was dumbfounded. He looked at Poplar Fruit with a confused expression. Poplar Fruit saw this and was secretly happy. He said, "No, learn well. Today, let's talk about the branches and origins of Hindi and its development in modern times." While the other party was in a daze, Poplar Fruit began his lecture. This was actually a lesson that Poplar Fruit had prepared for himself. Although it hadn't started yet, he had already prepared a draft in advance. If it was Poplar Fruit's own student, not many people would make a fuss. But this was the first time that Tang Sanzang, cellmate, and the national audience had seen Poplar Fruit teach with their own eyes. Although the sudden change in style made people laugh, Poplar Fruit's completely unscripted class made everyone, including the cameraman, speechless. Looking at Poplar Fruit's appearance, he was the real chatterbox. He was able to talk nonstop for half a day, unlike the walk-on Tang Sanzang, who only spoke nonsense. Yanggua's words had substance, and he quoted from many sources. He even used small stories from Hindi to make the audience indulge in it. Although this scene was not kept in the program later released an hour-long behind-the-scenes video that recorded Poplar Fruit's lecture to his cellmate. These were all very basic lessons. Even people who had a little foundation in Hindi could understand them. Not to mention Tang Sanzang's cellmate. Even the walk-ons in the cells outside were leaning on the door and listening with great interest. Poplar Fruit's teaching video was confirmed by the students. It was indeed the same content as his usual classes in school. Poplar Fruit's teaching was also widely praised by the audience and students. It could be said that the number of people who listened in on Poplar Fruit's class often exceeded the number of students who chose his class. Of course, there was a high turnover of audit students. When Poplar Fruit's class became more in-depth, most of the audit students who just wanted to join the fun would gradually give up. However, the netizens on the internet were very vocal. Poplar Fruit was even called the enchanting of the language world. Everyone wanted someone to record more of Poplar Fruit's teaching videos and put them on the internet. After a discussion among the leaders of Higashiyama University, they decided to send a professional cameraman to record Poplar Fruit's class and make it into a public class video for the netizens to learn from. This was not because Higashiyama University was generous, but because recording such a basic level of public class would not make Higashiyama University lose much. On the contrary, it could increase the fame of Higashiyama University. Moreover, they were still holding back. In the future, there might be a lot of talented students who would come to Higashiyama University to learn from Poplar Fruit after learning the basic courses online. In fact, the impact of this matter was far more than that. Next year, after Poplar Fruit obtained the status of professor, the Science and Education channel of CCTV would come and invite Poplar Fruit to participate in the lecture room. It would even give a new lease of life to this science and education program that had been going on for 15 years. Of course, this was something that would happen in the future. Back in reality, Kiki, who had left her father's side with concubine Ning, was brought to the palace. Together with the crown prince Xian Xian and the general's son Nu Yi, they learned ancient court etiquette. It could be seen that concubine Ning liked children very much. Whether it was the smart and cute Kiki, the clumsy and adorable Xian Xian, or the silly and sweet Nua, they could all make concubine Ning, who had previously shown excellent palace drama acting skills, laugh like a child. Ning Jin taught the three children little by little what to do when paying respects and what to kowtow to them. He was also very careful. Although he would raise his face from time to time to scare the three little guys, Ning Jin was secretly laughing behind them. Next, Ning Jin took out a pair of unique shoes. The soles of his shoes were high, like a pair of delicate women's shoes stepping on a square stone. This was a kind of shoes that the palace maids of the Qing dynasty wore, called flower pot soles. Compared to high heels, the flower pot soles were more balanced and didn't need to stand as hard as standing on tiptoes. It feels weird. After Kiki put it on, she suddenly grew 10 centimeters taller. Not only did her field of vision widen, but she also felt like she was riding on clouds. But from the audience's point of view, the little girl seemed to have grown up again. Before, she still had the appearance of a child. Now that she had changed into the exquisite robes of the palace, she had become so thin and tall. Moreover, her small face was so delicate that it was not inferior to a young girl's. It had to be said that Kiki now looked like a 15 or 16-year-old little beauty. Come on, take 2 steps. Take it slow. That's right. Ning Jin smiled until her eyes were curved. She bent down and supported Kiki with her hands, letting her walk in the tall flower pot stalls. Although Chi-Chi wasn't used to walking like she was walking on stilts, her excellent balance was on full display. She didn't waste too much time, and very soon, she was able to walk very smoothly. Now, I'll teach you the rules of walking in the palace. The first to walk on the stage was Xian Xian and Nua. The two little guys were a little nervous when facing concubine Ning, who was not kind. Xian Xian even walked with the same pace. I'm dying of laughter. Concubine Ning couldn't help but cover her mouth and snicker. However, she didn't make things difficult for the two children. Instead, she praised and encouraged them. Now, it was Kiki's turn. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.